The human ancestors group felt it too. His eyes were frigid, even though he did not care about the lives of Orthodox Unity cultivators. The fact that Yi Futian had wiped out the Orthodox Unity still embarrassed him. After all, on the surface, the Orthodox Unity was the #1 clan of the human realm. But Yi Futian led an army to the human realm and wiped it out. A great emperor was nailed to death there. This was Yi Futian's message to intimidate the invaders from the human realm. Human ancestor Yi Futian possesses the micro-world and can move the army with him. This way, he can appear on every battlefield, and it's incredibly disadvantageous to us. If we don't kill Yi Futian, then there will be endless threats, a great emperor said. His voice contained tragic fury. This great emperor who had stepped out was the leader of the Orthodox Unity. His Orthodox Unity had been wiped out. Among the people who had been killed were the descendants of his family. They had been massacred. Before this, his descendants had also died in the Battle of Taishang City, falling on the battlefield. Other than him, the rest of the Orthodox Unity had been killed. The human ancestor glanced at him with indifferent eyes. These were undoubtedly useless words. Could he not realize that himself? However, they had not taken down Yi Futian and Dongwang the Great in the previous siege on Yi Futian. If the other purposely avoided a head-on fight, it would be almost impossible to kill Yi Futian. This was also why the other dared to be so fearless and presumptuous. It was the prime example of one being fearless because of his skills. Yi Futian had extremely high confidence in his abilities. There was probably no one in the world now who could take down Yi Futian alone. Unless please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. The human ancestor looked at the super great emperors behind him and said, "In the future, the law of the heavenly path will be reconstructed. Everything will be reorganized, including how to become gods. Since you all returned, you should also contribute some strength. No need to hide or hold back." He knew that these ancient great emperors had their statuses and were extremely arrogant and lofty. Last time, only the eternal Sword Lord had attacked seriously. Many super great emperors had not truly displayed their abilities. All the gods fell silent when they heard the human ancestors' words. If the law of the heavenly path were reconstructed, it would be like the ancient heavenly path era. At that time, there would probably be something like the 8 legions that helped maintain the law in the world. The human ancestor was hinting at them. In addition, they feared the human ancestor. It was the human ancestor who had helped them return. After speaking, the human ancestor then looked below them and said to the cultivators of the Orthodox Unity, Yi Futian called himself the Heavenly Emperor and personally came to commit atrocities in the human realm. He even massacred many innocent cultivators and wiped out the Orthodox Unity. It is incredibly cruel. This kind of evil person must be killed by the world. I will lead the people of the 3 realms into an army and sweep across the world under the sword of justice. I hope to reconstruct the law of the world so the entire world can be a pure land like the human realm. However, many of the heaven realm and divine prefecture cultivators are stubborn and brainwashed by Yi Futian. We can only kill him. I hope the cultivators of the human realm can wield the sword of justice and enter the heaven realm and divine prefecture to help convert the world. The human ancestors' words impelled the cultivators of the Orthodox Unity City below, making them feel hatred toward the enemies. They wanted to kill their way into the divine prefecture and bring peace to the world. All the gods watched this quietly. The human ancestor probably did not care about the lives of the people. He wanted the entire world to be under his control and everyone to be his believer. As for what method he took or how many lives were lost, he probably did not care at all. The Orthodox Unity had been the #1 clan of the human realm. News of Yi Futian wiping it out quickly spread through all the continents of the human realm. Then the cultivators of all the forces spread it to the battlefields of the heaven realm and divine prefecture, intimidating the invasive forces in the heaven realm and divine prefecture greatly. After that, Yi Futian led his army to appear in various battlefields of the divine prefecture. The 8 great legions swept through everything, killing the invaders of the various continents. The invasive forces of the human realm had run rampant for 3 months, and now they encountered strong resistance. They did not dare to be reckless anymore. Instead, they even felt panicked, worrying that the great army would descend before them one day and kill them all. The human ancestor also led the gods to encircle and suppress Yi Futian, but Yi Futian never went up against them directly. He always had the army attack in a subtle and covert way before leaving quickly. However, there had almost been a dangerous incident once. Yi Futian had almost been stopped and could not bring his army away. If it had happened, then the human realm would have all of their forces attack Yi Futian's great army, and that would have been very dangerous. Thus, Yi Futian turned to the heaven realm and Buddhist clan, sending the human realm's 3 forces into a state of panic. They did not even dare to act rashly anymore. Finally, the war that had lasted for half a year had calmed quite a bit. It was not like before, where great battles occurred everywhere. Only small scuffles continued without stopping, appearing everywhere. The 3 invasive forces felt the threat and did not dare to act in a high-profile manner anymore. Yi Futian had also sacrificed 3 months for this. In these 3 months, he could have cultivated in isolation for 20 years, but he had to make this sacrifice for the cultivators of the divine prefecture and heaven realm. Now that the war had been reduced greatly, Yi Futian could finally stop cultivating. Yi Futian went to the peak of a black mountain of an empty continent in the original realm. He cultivated alone, not wanting to be disturbed, so he chose this remote area. Donghuang the Great and the others saw Yi Futian in his micro-heavenly path world, but they did not say anything. Yi Futian had only gone through 3 months outside, but they had gone through 20 years in here. This meant that Yi Futian had missed 20 years of cultivation. However, Yi Futian had saved many cultivators. Whether he had made the right or wrong choice could only be answered with time. Donghuang the Great only wished that they would not lose to time. However, when Yi Futian had led the army into battle everywhere, he had not let those on the path of the emperors participate. Their first priority was cultivation. People like Gu Donglu and Donghuang Diyuan did not participate. They stayed in his micro-heavenly path world to cultivate. For them, improving their abilities was the most important task. Nowadays, more and more strong figures in the great emperor plane were on Yi Futian's side. After all, even if they did not count the cultivation time from before, it had been half a year since this war started in the outside world, but 40 years had passed in the micro-heavenly path world. Before this, they had also cultivated for many years with Yi Futian's help. That day, the micro-heavenly path world was already like an entire world. Like the outside world, it had its own world law and spiritual chi. If a random person were thrown into here, they would not even distinguish the worlds clearly. Yi Futian checked everyone's cultivation statuses. The core figures had gradually all entered the path of the emperors. Gu Donglio's cultivation of breaking his path was also becoming progressively complete. If he exited, he would definitely give the world a surprise. There was a divine palace in Yi Futian's micro-world. It had a mountain, a creek, and a lot of foliage. There were some pavilions scattered aesthetically. They were elegant yet stylish and felt like a paradise outside of the world. It was peaceful and beautiful. This was the String Pavilion. At the moment, elegant music was streaming out of the divine palace. It made one feel relaxed and happy. This was only one corner of the micro-world. Many years had passed since Yi Futian had created this micro-world. Over these long years, the micro-world was no longer the barren land from before. The cultivators in here had established their own permanent cultivation lands. The String Pavilion was where Yi Futian and his teacher, Hua Fenglu, had lived when he was young. Clearly, this was where Hua Fenglio's family lived. His master, Mistress, Jiu, Nianyu, and the others all lived here. The graceful music came from Hua Fengliu. Even if he had wanted to help with the war, he was powerless. Plus, this was Yi Futian's micro-world. There were no conflicts, and Yi Futian would not discuss the conflicts outside with him either. It was long past the time for his master to retire. Yi Futian naturally would not let him worry. Two maidens were cultivating at the mountaintop of the string pavilion. The two of them had extraordinary temperaments, as if they had already left the mundane world and were heavenly fairies. One of the women's beauty was out of the world. She looked ethereal and clear, completely untainted. The other woman was like the incarnation of a perfect goddess. There was no flaw on her entire body. She was serene and elegant. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. Naturally, these two women were Hua Qingqing and Hua Jiu. They had been cultivating together the entire time. Right now, it seemed that the Buddhist voice echoed throughout the mountain. It was Hua Qingqing reciting ancient scriptures for Hua Jiu. She was like a Buddhist light. The glow of the Buddhist clan shimmered faintly on her body. She was extraordinarily pure and sacred and could not be desecrated. Meanwhile, Hua Jiu bathed under the Buddhist light and seemed to have entered a miraculous state. She was utterly immersed in cultivation and forgot even herself. Without them realizing it, a white-haired figure landed on the ancient mountaintop. He did not disturb their cultivation and just stood to the side quietly. Hua Qingqing was still reading the Buddhist scripture. Hua Jiu was still immersed in her meditation and cultivation, completely focused. Yi Futian was like air. No one paid attention to him. He had never been treated like this before. However, he was not angry at all either. Instead, he looked at Hua Qingqing with appreciation. But when he looked at Hua Jiu, there was more gentle affection. Brother-in-law. A voice traveled into Yi Futian's eardrums. He looked back and saw Nianyu blinking at him in the distance. Even though she was not a little girl anymore, Hua Nianyu still acted like it. After all, judging from her cultivation, her age was still very young. How long have they cultivated for? Yi Futian asked, transmitting his voice to Hua Nianyu. A few decades have passed like a day, Hua Nianyu said. I don't understand what they're cultivating, but it seems that sister's cultivation has reached a critical moment. Then why are you here? Yi Futian asked. I don't know either. It seems to be easier to be enlightened when cultivating here, Hua Nianyu said strangely. My comprehension of cultivation is much clearer too, and I can understand more easily. Is it the effect of the Buddhist voice? Yes. Yi Futian nodded without hesitation. This is the light of enlightenment. Yi Futian's gaze fell upon Hua Qingqing's body as he spoke. Hua Qingqing had been the Buddhist lamp accompanying the Buddha in cultivation. She had listened to the Buddha teaching the scriptures, attending the Buddha for 1,000 years as the ancient Buddha Qingdang. Then consciousness was born from the Buddhist lamp. In a way, Hua Qingqing's intelligence had been born because of the Buddha. She had been made from intelligence. Nianyu did not understand. She would have to ask Grandpa Xian when she got a chance. Usually her sister and brother-in-law were very busy and did not have time to pay attention to her, so Hua Nianyu would bother Lord Taixian and the others. At that moment, the Buddhist light faded from Hua Qingqing's body. Her pretty eyes opened, and she gazed in Yi Futian's direction. Then Hua Jiu also opened her eyes. Her gaze fell upon Yi Futian's body, and she smiled brilliantly. You're back, Hua Jiu said gently. When did you break your path? Yi Futian asked. The years that you left, Hua Jiu replied with a smile, as if she was talking about something unimportant. Yi Futian had dealt with matters in the outside world for 3 months without returning, but in here, 20 years had passed already. That was why Hua Jiu said the years that he had been gone for. Jiu, why did you break the path? Yi Futian's voice was low but gentle. This was his heavenly path world. He was in charge of the world law, while Hua Jiu was his wife. She did not need to take the risk and break the path. Qingqing is here, so there aren't any dangers, Hua Jiu said, still smiling gently. Plus, I have my own comprehension from these years, and want to cultivate my own path. Is that not allowed? Yi Futian looked towards Hua Qingqing. With Hua Qingqing by his side, he also had a miraculous feeling. It felt just like what Nianyu had said, as if it could bring him to enlightenment. Hua Qingqing was the reincarnation of the Buddhist lamp. Her cultivation was very unique. Yi Futian could feel the light of enlightenment from her Buddhist light. All these years, Hua Qingqing had also been helping Hua Jiu cultivate. I don't know what you two want. Yi Futian shook his head with a wry smile. How could he really blame Hua Jiu? He was just a bit worried. Don't worry. Everything is successful, Hua Qingqing replied with a smile. Her voice was gentle and made people believe her fully. Yes. Yi Futian nodded. Qingqing, you have to keep an eye on Jiu. Don't let her fool around. Hua Qingqing smiled and nodded. Brother-in-law, are you leaving as soon as you're back? Nianyu muttered. Earlier, they had been transmitting their voices. Was her brother-in-law planning on slipping away without even actually talking to her this time? Nianyu, your brother-in-law has many things to do, Hua Jiu said to Nianyu. Nianyu hung her head, feeling a bit down. Hurry and go cultivate. No need to mind me, Hua Jiu said to Yi Futian. Naturally, she knew that the most important thing to Yi Futian now was time. Okay, I'll leave after visiting Master and Masteress. Yi Futian nodded. He left after strolling around. He indeed had a lot of matters to handle and had no time to waste at all. After Yi Futian left, Hua Jiu asked Hua Qingqing, Qingqing, would it be effective if you helped him cultivate? It's limited. Hua Qingqing shook her head. He has already created his own world and has already reached enlightenment. Even with the blessing of wisdom, it's hard for him to comprehend more. Everything depends on himself. I see. Hua Jiu nodded. Let us continue cultivating then. Okay, Hua Qingqing said. Then they closed their eyes. The Buddhist voice wrapped around them. It was as if someone was reading the Buddhist scriptures on this divine mountain, making this divine palace seem like an extremely sacred Pure Land. After Yi Futian visited Hua Jiu, he went to many other places. He checked over the state of their cultivation and gave some help. Then he left to focus on his own cultivation. Yi Futian focused on cultivation. He had demon beasts under his control in the outside world, so he would know if anything major happened. After he led the army to fight everywhere for 3 months, the War of the Six Realms was not as aggressive as before. Even though war still existed in the Six Realms, it was much more peaceful than before. The invaders from the 3 realms did not dare to kill mindlessly anymore. Time passed quickly. A few decades passed in the snap of a finger. Of course, this was the time in Yi Futian's world. That day, Yi Futian sat cross-legged on a divine mountain in his micro-world. His entire body dazzled, and light flowed across him. In the span of a breath, he seemed to produce limitless vitality. If he spat out a hot breath, it would make the sun hotter. When he spat out a cool breath, it made coldness shroud the world. All of his actions, even his inhale and exhale, could affect the operation of this universe. The sound of his heartbeat seemed to have transformed into the universe's pulse. When he was calm, the universe would run smoothly. When he was angered, the entire universe would be upended. Yi Futian continued to meditate in this quiet state, immersing in it. He seemed to breathe together with the universe. That day, Yi Futian finally opened his eyes and took a deep breath. He did not need to perceive the entire world. Everything had been imprinted in his mind. Nowadays he was the entire world. The entire universe was him. 70 years, Yi Futian murmured. This time he had actually spent 70 years cultivating in seclusion. If he added the time from before, it had already been more than 100 years. Of course, 70 years was not even 1 year in the outside world. Please keep reading on Wuxia World, EU. But in Yi Futian's world, dramatic changes had already occurred. With the 40 years after the war had erupted and the 70 years now, more than 100 years had passed already. There had been decades of cultivation before the war had erupted too. One could imagine how many great changes had happened. Even the cultivators that Yi Futian had collected into his micro-world in the 3 months of battles and joined the legions, their cultivation states had improved too. They had become a young force in the 8 legions. As for the core figures who had already entered the path of the emperors, their cultivation states had become even stronger. A batch of great emperors had appeared in the micro-world. Right now, Yi Futian's body in the outside world was also completely brilliant. He radiated with dazzling divine light as if he was no longer a human. Instead, he was the incarnation of the path. Even though he was in the vast void, he still did not seem minuscule. Merely sitting there, he was like the absolute center of that world. Boom! At that moment, Yi Futian's eyes opened, and divine light shot out of his orbs. Even the space here shook because of it with unsteady but intense ripples. There had not been any commotion in all these years. Has the human ancestor returned? Yi Futian thought, even though it had not been long in the outside world. The human ancestor's true form had always been cultivating and preparing to return at any time. He did not know how he was now. With a thought, Yi Futian's figure vanished. The heavenly imperial city of the heaven realm was now under the rule of the strong figures of the human realm. The force from the human divine palace, personally, took over. The human realm had connected a space passageway to travel through the 6 realms and conquer the realms more easily. The human realm even constructed many majestic palaces in the heavenly imperial city. Just then, an extremely horrifying divine light suddenly descended from the dome of the sky. The cultivators of the heavenly imperial city all saw it. Many layers of the sky fell from the dome of the heavens, carrying many cultivators and various ancient pavilions and palaces. They stood atop the heavenly imperial palace. The 99 heavens. The cultivators of the heavenly imperial palace felt their hearts pulse. After the heaven realm was conquered, the original cultivators of the heaven realm became the lowest class. Usually they kept a low profile, but after seeing the 99 heavens reappear in the sky above the heavenly imperial city now, it was like their hearts had been struck. Was the heavenly emperor back? The 99 heavens were not sealed off yet. They saw many cultivator legions appear in the sky above the heavenly imperial city. Their auras were all frightening. Like a heavenly army, every single person had extraordinary temperaments. There were also the generals of each legion in the sky above the grand armies. The cultivators of the heaven realm saw many familiar figures. Great sky lords Black and White Almighty were now great emperors. The 4 heavenly kings had entered the great emperor plane now too. Dong Huang Duen, princess of the divine prefecture, great emperor plane. There were many other people whose bodies were covered with the divine, great emperor glow. It was like a group of gods descending. The blinding divine light fell into the eyes of the heavenly imperial city cultivators, shaking their hearts and souls. 1 year after the war had erupted, the heavenly emperor came, bringing a group of gods. It was no longer one or a few great emperors. It was an army of great emperors. The age of gods had finally come. The human ancestor ruled the old gods. The heavenly emperor led the new gods. They gazed to the top of the sky, the peak of the 99 heavens. A white-haired figure stood there, like the master of all gods. His gaze overlooked the lower sky and swept toward the heavenly imperial city. "Retake the heavenly imperial city," he said. "Yes, heavenly emperor." The voices rang throughout the void as the many legions accepted the command simultaneously. After cultivating in the micro-world, they were all incredibly reverent of Yi Futian. He was the god of creation who had created a complete world. He could even rule over time and change the law of time. The heavenly emperor had returned and would rule over the entire world. The strong figures of the human realm all took out their communication items and asked for reinforcement. The 6 grand legions advanced toward the heavenly imperial palace. This was fated to be a battle with no surprises. The gods that Yi Futian led did not attack. They watched the great battle in the heavenly imperial city quietly as everything was destroyed utterly. The strong figures of the human realm were absolutely crushed. What put them in even more despair was that there were no reinforcements. The heavenly army that had returned had not destroyed the transmission matrix, as if letting reinforcement come freely. However, no one came to reinforce them. Clearly, they also knew how frightening these 6 legions were. Coming would probably be suicide. The cultivators of the original heaven realm all witnessed this scene. This time, Yi Futian did not leave. Instead, he just watched how the heavenly army retook the heavenly imperial city. Is the heavenly emperor already able to fight against the gods led by the human ancestor? The people of the heavenly imperial city all thought. Clearly, heavenly emperor Yi Futian did not plan on avoiding battle anymore. He had the 99 heavens reappear in the heaven realm and retook the heavenly imperial palace. He led the group of great emperors in a comeback. He was clearly prepared to declare war. At the peak of the human divine palace of the human realm, the human ancestor was sitting cross-legged while cultivating. That moment, he seemed to sense something, and his eyes opened. He looked into the distance. "Has he proved his path?" the human ancestor murmured softly. He did not think that his biggest opponent would be a junior. But actually, he had always been fighting with this lineage. From the heavenly emperor to the sovereign princess, and now to Yi Futian, it had never changed. Just like how he had had the final victory the last 2 times, the result would be the same this time too. The heavenly emperor and heavenly imperial palace reconstructed the 99 heavens. The heavenly emperor's army swept through the heaven realm. Cultivators all over the heaven realm reacted, following the great army of the heavenly emperor in resistance. They destructed and drove out the human realm cultivators, taking back the territory of the heaven realm like wildfire. Back then, the soldiers of the human realm had conquered almost all of the heaven realm in 3 months without getting blood on their swords. But this time, the heaven realm fought back fiercely. Each of the 6 legions were able to sweep through a corner of the world, let alone doing it together. One could imagine how terrifying it was. Even without looking at the others, just the Revelation Legion contained the backbone of the original Donghuang Imperial Palace. Then, after a century of practice and training many new members, they were now an extremely frightening force. Thus, this time was even faster. In many places, the strong figures of the human realm heard the news and began to retreat before they even attacked. They did not dare to loiter. If they continued guarding the place, it would probably only mean death. The Heaven Realm's army were completely merciless towards the invaders. Thus, this battle swept through the Heaven Realm as fast as lightning. In a mere half-month's time, they had retaken most of the Heaven Realm. After the Heaven Realm was retaken, the strong figures that had invaded the divine prefecture and Buddhist world also started retreating. They were extremely scattered because they had taken too much territory. If the Heaven Realm's army came by now, they would not be able to hold up at all. They had to gather their strength together first before they could fight against the Heaven Realm's army. The majestic heavenly palace loomed in the 99 heavens. Heavenly Emperor Yi Futian stood at the peak pavilion of the heavenly palace, and as the heavenly emperor's father, Donghuang the Great, stood to his side. Empress Huajieyu and Dong Huang Diyuan sat on the left and right of Yi Futian and Dong Huang the Great. Godfather Yu Tu stood in the first spot below the Heavenly Emperor. Below that was the String Emperor and Book Deity. They had been followers of Yi Futian's mother. Many strong figures sat below the steps. Some also stood there. Those with seats were the great emperors from the Buddhist clan. The Buddha of the Buddhist clan was the senior of both Dong Huang the Great and Yi Futian, so he naturally had the respect he deserved. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. The strong figures from the Divine Prefecture, Heaven Realm, and those who followed Yi Futian all stood. After all, Yi Futian and Dong Huang the Great were up there. However, when dozens of people stood there, the scene was still extremely spectacular. These people were all strong figures who had entered the great emperor plane. The heaven court of the heavenly palace were practically all great emperors. They were a true great emperor legion. Further down was the vast land of the 99 heavens. The 6 great legions were there. Each legion had their own camps and were further divided into smaller legions. They were scattered, but organized and had their own leaders. This kind of scene was honestly very breathtaking. The highest powers of the 3 realms were gathered here. It was also the Heavenly Emperor's first time officially gathering everyone here to discuss matters. Everyone had come. No one was missing. I pay my respects to your majesties, Heavenly Emperor and Dong Huang. Just then Yu Tu turned toward Yi Futian and took the lead in bowing. With Yu Tu leading them, everyone below instantly responded and bowed. I pay my respects to your majesty, the Heavenly Emperor, your majesty, Dong Huang. Instantly, the earth-shaking voices resounded through the 99 heavens, making all the strong figures feel their blood bubbling hotly. After cultivating in the micro-world, their group had already reached this strong state without realizing it. Yu Tu had a solemn expression, but he was full of ineffable emotions inside. His young master had finally reached this step. Being bowed to by various gods was such a shocking scene. If she could see today's scene, she must feel gratified. Next, they only had one goal: kill the human ancestor, take down the human realm, dark world, and empty divine realm, and unify the 7 realms. Godfather, Yi Futian called. Then he looked at everyone and said, "No need to bow." Yi Futian was still very kind, but when they looked at the strong figure in the throne, everyone realized that this junior was already standing at the pinnacle of the world. Even Dong Huang the Great and the Buddha of the 6 emperors were willing to give him this seat. Among the crowd, many cultivators had had rivalries with Yi Futian before, such as Great Emperor Di, Hao, and the others. Yi Futian did not kill them, but they still had restrictions. Imprints had been planted in them with special tactics. They were kept alive because they still had some value and could be used. Among the many strong figures from the 18 domain manors of the Divine Prefecture, there were also many old friends of Yi Futian who felt very emotional. As for those from the Ziwei Imperial Palace, they felt genuinely happy and proud for Yi Futian when seeing today's grandiosity. Their palace lord had now reached the peak of the cultivation world. Probably even the evil emperor and dark sovereign would not fight against Yi Futian anymore. His actual opponent was probably only the human ancestor. Yi Futian did not think what everyone was thinking. For him, he did not feel excited or honored at how glorious this event was. Instead, he only felt the pressure. It was not the pressure of sitting in this divine throne. Instead, it was because he now decided everyone's fates. The human ancestor was someone who wanted to replace the heavenly path. He fought against Yi Futian's great-grandfather and killed his mother. He was not confident when facing such an opponent, but he had no other path to take. When he was by himself, he was able to lose, but now he could no longer lose. Too many people's lives were connected with his. Even now, there were many faces before him. Many people are clear about the reasons behind the War of the 7 Realms, but some don't actually know. Yi Futian began saying now from his divine throne. When the war erupted, I once fought against the human ancestor. I discovered that it was only a physical clone and not his true form. The true human ancestor had once killed the heavenly emperor and my mother. Even though the 6 realms formed a fragile equilibrium, it was always under the human ancestor's control. He has always been plotting secretly, letting the ancient gods return. When his true form returns, I'm afraid he will replace the heavens. When the gods returned and declared the invasive war, the people who followed him thrived. Those who went against him died. The human ancestor says that he oversees justice, but he started bloodshed. If he really controls the heavens, it will be a disaster. No one can predict what will happen at that time. Everyone here are mostly core figures from the Buddhist clan, divine prefecture, and heaven realm. Many things can go unsaid. However, I don't have absolute confidence in this battle. No one knows what level the human ancestor's true form has reached. If you all go to battle with me, you will be taking a huge risk. Thus, even if you wish to step back today, I will give you one last chance. You can choose to leave. Yi Futian spoke while gazing at the crowd. After this, he would declare the ultimate battle against the human realm. Many people would die in this ultimate battle. He was giving everyone one last chance. Before this, these people had all cultivated in his micro-world and had received many benefits. Thus, this was everyone's final chance to choose. No one was born with the duty to save the world, let alone the fact that this battle was still decided by the top figures. All of these cultivators were just cannon fodder at most. If possible, Yi Futian was not even willing to have them participate in battle. Letting the great emperors fight in the ultimate battle was enough. However, the human ancestor wanted to control the 7 realms. He ordered all the realms to go to war, sweeping everyone into the battleground. Thus, there had to be a force like this in order to resist the invasion. Otherwise, the 3 realms would be like a handful of sand. It would be conquered and invaded by the other side. The group of strong figures was silent for a moment. Then someone stated loudly, "I'm willing to go to war with the Heavenly Emperor. I'm willing to go to war with the Heavenly Emperor." All the voices resounded in the air. Many of the cultivators here were from Emperor-level forces. The majority were all willing to do this. Yi Futian's gaze looked around below. The deafening voices sounded in the heavens. However, he realized that many people still did not speak out. The spirited voices seemed to have covered those who were swayed, but they were still under Yi Futian's stare. He extended a hand, signaling for the people to be quiet. Then he continued saying, "I am not choosing those who are willing this time. Instead, I am giving people a chance to step back. You all can be rest assured. You've all contributed in the earlier battles. Those who are willing to step back today will not be questioned." There were still no voices. It seemed that no one dared to take the lead. After a moment, someone finally stepped out, but he still did not speak. Instead, he took a few steps toward the back, separating from the great army. Gradually, others retreated after him. Their cultivation had improved greatly in the past few years. Many thought that this was already enough, and after calming down, they indeed felt that there was no need to continue fighting. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. For them, whether it was the human ancestor ruling the 7 realms or Yi Futian, it had a great influence on the 7 realms, but it probably would not be too different for them personally. There was no need to gamble. If they lost the battle, they would lose their lives. More and more people stepped back. There were quite a few from the 6 legions. Many of them were the ones who had joined later. They had joined the army passionately when they had been invaded and felt hatred and anger. Other than that, many people from the Heaven Realm and Divine Prefecture also withdrew. Some of the Divine Prefecture's top forces were among them, including strong figures of domain chiefs' manors, such as the chief manor of the Shangqing domain. The most loyal were the believers of the Ziwei Imperial Palace who had always followed Yi Futian and the Buddhists. There were also direct forces under the Donghuang imperial palace. They all had their own beliefs. Yi Futian watched all of this quietly. As more and more people withdrew, this gradually reached a certain scale. It did not stop until some time later. As expected, those who benefit but lack faith are more likely to betray, Yi Futian thought when he saw this scene. For example, some of the domain chiefs' manners and top forces of the divine prefecture had been the upper level of the divine prefecture, but still many of them withdrew. Anyone else? Yi Futian continued. Some more scattered people stepped back. Finally, a moment later, no one moved again. Yi Futian was a bit disappointed, but also glad. He was disappointed that many people had withdrawn. He was glad because, compared to the overall group, they were still the minority. He was not perfect. Even though he did not wish to see people die in battle and gave them a chance to withdraw, deep down he was still disappointed in the people who withdrew. This was unavoidable as a human. With a thought, countless beams of divine light shone down from the sky, transforming into many imprints. They fell onto the cultivators who had chosen to leave. "Your Majesty," someone yelped. "Heavenly Emperor, you promised not to question us." They were a little panicked at this scene. Earlier, they had believed in Yi Futian's words, which was why they dared to step back. But now, Yi Futian left an imprint. "This was do not worry," Yi Futian said, his voice resounding in the void. This caused everyone to quiet down and let out a breath. In that previous moment, they had thought that Yi Futian would punish them. Even though they believed that Yi Futian was not that kind of person, they were still a bit afraid. "Your Majesty, why did you?" someone opened their mouth to ask. "There will only be two results after this battle. Victory or defeat," Yi Futian said. "If this battle ends in defeat, then those who choose to fight may very well die. They will die for their own faith while you all can live and continue cultivating. If it is the other result and we win this battle, then I will reform the world law, and the divine positions will belong to the cultivators with faith." When he finished speaking, countless beams of light fell again, landing on the cultivators who had chosen to stay. Those who chose to stay clearly had their own beliefs. They were willing to gamble their lives and continue to fight. If Yi Futian managed the world law in the future, then the people who sat in the divine seats would be chosen from them. This meant that those who chose to leave would forever lose the chance at a divine position. Their hearts seemed to be struck by lightning at that moment. The age of gods was coming, while the great emperor plane was a mutual goal that everyone pursued. Did they lose the right to that? "Go now." Yi Futian waved his hand and a spatial door opened in the 99 heavens. Many cultivators felt a little muddled as they stepped into the spatial door and left the micro-world. They knew that Yi Futian was not just trying to intimidate them. If Yi Futian won this battle, he would be the ruler of the world law. Of course, he would determine who possessed the divine positions. Those who had already reached the top of Yi Futian's micro-world felt even more complicated emotions inside. Not too long after, that group left the micro-world. Other than those who did not dare to leave, all that remained had their own beliefs. Next, what you all must do is focus on cultivating. "It's best if we don't need you to participate in battle," Yi Futian announced. Everyone felt emotional in their hearts. The Heavenly Emperor really did have a fresh personality. "I was not trying to scare people with my words. If we lose, you all might die. Thus, if we die, then you all should abandon the fighting and live on," Yi Futian said. "Go now." The strong figures all bowed and then retreated gradually. Of course, some people were still on the steps because of their close relationship with Yi Futian, even though they were not great emperors. Yi Futian's eyes fell upon someone and asked, "Qingyuan, why did you not step onto the path of the emperors?" Xia Qingyuan could definitely step onto the path of the emperors with his help, but she still had not stepped onto that path. "Heavenly Emperor, I won't be able to change the battlefield of the Great Emperor Plane even if I do step onto the path of the Emperors. On the other hand, if I stay below the Great Emperor Plane, I can save many people if war erupts, Xia Qingyuan replied. She cultivated the path of life and death. Yi Futian nodded slightly and looked at her. It felt a little strange to hear her call him Heavenly Emperor. Most of the people agreed with Xia Qingyuan's thoughts. The total number of great emperors was small. Hence, the situation would be very messy if the cultivators apart from the great emperors started an all-out war. Xia Qingyuan could save many lives if she were to join the war as a combat medic and rescue the injured. Many of the great emperors saw her in a new light as she had stopped herself walking on the path of the emperors because of this, especially the Buddhists who put their hands before her and recited the Buddhist sutra with the sound of Buddha. At the end of the day, this war will be decided by the elites. Thus, I will do all I can to prevent a battle between lower cultivation level combatants from breaking out. I am planning to infiltrate the human realm to see if I can sneak a look at the human ancestors' real body's cultivation level, Yi Futian uttered. Now that his cultivation had improved to the next level, invading the human divine palace was considered a trial. He would not mind going on a killing spree if the opportunity presented itself. This operation is a little too risky. Please reconsider the idea, Your Majesty, Yu Tu suggested. Although he was Yi Futian's godfather, he had been greeting the latter as his young master. But he had since changed the form of address of the second mention to Heavenly Emperor, or Your Majesty, during an oral address at that moment. I don't agree with this idea as well. The String Emperor chimed in. Did Yi Futian want to infiltrate the human divine palace as an experiment? If the actual body of the human ancestor at the human divine palace were to awake, it would undoubtedly be hazardous. The people who had disagreed first were followers of Yi Futian's late mother. They were the true loyal retainers of the sovereign princess back then. Hence, they immediately freaked out upon hearing his idea, since he was the only progeny of his mother. If the human ancestor's real body had recovered, he would have shown up here by now. Even the likes of Ji Wudao could retreat unscathed after invading the human divine palace back then, Yi Futian explained. Furthermore, even if the human ancestor almost had a full recovery, he might not necessarily be capable of keeping me there. The voice of Yi Futian was filled with absolute confidence. With his current strength, it would be an arduous task to trap him as long as he did not let down his guard. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. I second that. Dong Huang the Great, who sat beside Yi Futian, stated, if the human ancestor did not recover, this might very well be a chance for us. Should any unforeseen dangers befall him, he could flee from the scene right away. So, I don't see a problem here. I think it is worth a shot. Since Dong Huang the Great was the father of Yi Futian, he would never allow his son to get into any difficult situation. However, the latter was bearing the responsibility of preserving 7 realms. Being the one who sat on the divine throne, he should perform his duties as Heavenly Emperor. Since the father and son duo, Dong Huang the Great and Yi Futian, had spoken, everyone remained taciturn. All of them could tell that Yi Futian wished to avoid an all-out war as much as possible. It would be better to solve the issue by himself, while the second best outcome would be the great emperors settling the conflicts among themselves. The last thing he wanted to see was the common people living in the 7 realms being involved in their war. You're right, Father. It is definitely worth trying. Don't worry. I'll be careful, Yi Futian replied. The people at the scene nodded after hearing that. Even Yu Tu did not insist on discouraging him anymore. Yi Futian knitted his brows together all of a sudden. Then he stretched his hand and waved it, after which a projection appeared before his eyes. A group of cultivators with extraordinary temperament showed up around the Heaven's Gate outside the 99 heavens. They were all great Emperor Plane beings who were surrounded by divine light as they looked at the 99 heavens. We would like to have an audience with Heavenly Emperor. The voice of the one leading the great emperors could be heard announcing that. His deafening voice shook the 99 heavens and traveled to the heavenly palace. Everyone inside could listen to him. "Let's go and check it out," Futian said. With a thought, a door materialized in front of the heavenly palace. Then he stood up and took a step forward to exit the door. The other cultivators followed him behind and walked out of it as well. At once, a similar spatial door appeared around the area of the Heaven's Gate. Futian and the others could be seen getting out of it. After taking a step forward, Futian and his subordinates turned to stare at the great emperors outside the 99 heavens, who they had never seen before. Furthermore, Futian could sense something unusual about the aura emanated from the great emperors. Now that he had reached the realm of the heavenly path, he could know why he had this kind of feeling. It was because this group of great emperors was not from around here. They were beings from another universe, also known as extraterrestrial beings. "State your business," Futian piped while staring at the great emperors. The leading figure, who looked in their 40s, was clothed in splendor with a dignified appearance. Their body was surrounded by a golden divine light, giving off a highborn vibe as if they had an extraordinary background. "I presume that your majesty already knew we are from the outer realms," the leader of the outer realms' great emperors answered. "It seems like your majesty has a conflict with the gods of the human realm. We had come from afar and witnessed this war, but we do not wish to see it continue like this. So, we would like to if your majesty wants some help." Futian was confused after hearing that. Then he looked at them and asked, "Help? Do you want to participate in this war?" "If it is your will, then yes," the other party replied. Futian was curious why they were so confident that they could be of help to him. "How do you plan to do that? What is your condition?" Futian questioned. If these people were genuinely trying to help out of goodwill, he would not mind having a few extra hands. But he knew for a fact that nothing would come free in life. These individuals were extraterrestrial beings who came from another universe. He still had no way of telling if they were friends or foes, but according to his speculation, they would most likely be his enemies. An outsider would never be of like mind with them. How could these people, who had come from afar, claim to have no agendas at all? Back then, his mother had reconstructed the heavenly path because she came to know the existence of other universes. Her ultimate wish was to prove her path as the apex cultivator to protect this universe. "We will not ask for any unusual term. We want Your Majesty to open a cross-universe space passage so that the cultivators from our world can come over as reinforcements," the person noted. Yet, Futian furrowed his brows at that person's words. The other party requested him to open a space passage that would connect two different universes so that their forces could come over here. Listening to this term alone was enough to let him imagine multiple possible outcomes. What if the other party used this space passage that connected two universes for invasion? Most importantly, he had no clue about the strength of the strongest cultivators from other universes yet. Therefore, he had been looking for the answer to several questions. What was the summit of cultivation? Did the finishing line even exist? Nevertheless, he could tell it was rather difficult for the other party to open a space passage that could cross between universes. At the very least, they still could not pull it off yet. Hence, they offered to work with him. "I want to know more about your universe," Dong Huang the Great queried as he took a step forward. "Also, were the 7 great emperors who passed away previously one of yours?" Dong Huang the Great became vigilant right after hearing the words of the other party. If the space passage that could connect both universes were to be opened, the cultivators from their world could cross over to this world. So, this request should never be accepted. And that was the reason he wanted to know their overall strength and the extent of the ability of their strongest cultivators. After hearing his father's question, Futian recalled the 7 great emperors he killed in one hit. This group of great emperors had traveled together, so their powers must be from the same source. Was there a ruler class individual in their universe? Were these cultivators the subordinates of a ruling class like the 7 great emperors Futian had killed previously? What was their true purpose of wanting to open a space passage that could connect between universes? Were they trying to help him out with no hidden agenda? While Futian was looking at them, their leader replied, "Yes, we had some conflicts previously, but we should let the past be the past. Please pay it no heed, Your Majesty." As expected, all these people were from the same force. The 7 individuals were wielders of the power of judgment. They could be considered the judges of an elite organization. The 7 of them were a single entity. These people could be from an extremely powerful force. Futian, our universe had gone through the collapse of the heavenly path, causing the decline of our cultivation world. However, it isn't the case for other universes. If they were to continue their growth, their overall strength could be higher than expected. If we were to open a space passage that could connect both of our universes, they might be a greater threat than the human ancestor. Donghuang the Great notified Futian through telepathy in concern. "I got it." Futian nodded. He understood this very well, even without Donghuang the Great's reminder. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. To open a cross-cosmos portal for cultivators from an unknown universe would be equivalent to bringing disaster upon themselves. We will settle this problem among ourselves. Thanks for your offer, Futian declined. All of you have traveled from a distant universe. I will welcome you with open arms if you are here as our guests. But if you try anything funny like what the 7 great emperors did previously, I will never hesitate to annihilate you immediately. After hearing Futian's words, the other party furrowed their brows in displeasure. They had been observing the situation in this universe ever since they arrived here, only to find a declined world where the total number of great emperors was very little. Initially, they had the intention of saving this world. After opening the space passage that connected the 2 universes, the cultivators of this world could finally see the true divine relic. With that, this world would have a united law at last. Yet, little did they expect that Futian would reject them and even dared to threaten them. You know very well about the current situation in the 7 realms, Your Majesty. Why are you so quick to reject us? Are you not afraid that we might look for other people to work together? That person remarked. They had approached Futian because the latter was at a disadvantage. So, they had assumed that he might probably agree to receive their help. On the other hand, it was nearly impossible that the human ancestor would cooperate with them since their goal was the same as his. Right after he finished speaking, an overwhelming divine light glowed from the eyes of Futian, who emanated a palpable rage all around himself. Immediately, the color of the sky changed while frightening divine thunder rumbled violently. Just then, the divine light of sun and moon shone and covered the group of great emperors. "Are you trying to threaten me?" Futian's voice was as loud as divine thunder traveling across the void, shaking the atmosphere and sky. As the great path roared, every motion in this realm seemed to be brimming with the heavenly rule power as if he was the great path himself. A hint of watchfulness flashed across the eyes of the group of great emperors after sensing an intimidating threat from Futian. The expression of the leader's face turned solemn after realizing that they were a little too impatient. They should avoid angering him since they were in his territory at the moment. "No, we wouldn't dare to think of it. We came here with good intentions, thinking that perhaps we could ally. Since things are not working out for the both of us, we shall take our leave first," the leader uttered as they felt the pressure of the gods' might on them. Instantly, an epiphany moment hit them that they could not afford to provoke Futian in this universe, so they should retreat at once. "Hold on!" Futian shrieked. Their blood ran cold, and they stared at him. "You are coming and going as you like. What are you taking me for?" Futian demanded. "You did not answer our question yet." I want to know your purpose in requesting a space passage between our universes to be opened." Right after he spoke, the boundless sky and earth were covered by his divine power. At that moment, the entire dimension seemed to be frozen. None of them could leave this place without breaking a sweat. "What is the meaning of this, Your Majesty?" the leader commented. Yi Futian set his eyes on them. Dong Huang the Great moved forward from behind and unleashed the divine power of revelation. In that instant, the group of great emperors had gotten their divine powers restricted before they could react. It was even harder to release their divine powers on top of the pressure from Yi Futian's god's might. "Jiu, it's your turn!" Yi Futian shouted. Hua Jiu nodded. She understood his order tacitly because they were husband and wife. An invisible divine power permeated the atmosphere. It was formless and intangible, somewhat similar to the divine power of revelation, and it could invade the enemy's spiritual will in a flash. After having their divine powers retrained, their spiritual wills were blocked by a powerful barrier. They could feel an invisible and colorless wall covering their spirit domains and sealing them. Divine power of colorless realm. A divine light surrounded Hua Jiu. Her garments were fluttering while her black hair flowed in the wind when she charged her divine power with all her might. This was the divine power that Hua Jiu and Hua Qingqing gained enlightenment on together. The latter had helped the former with Buddhist doctrines, and she eventually developed the divine power of colorless realm that could suppress the spirit domain of other cultivators. Under the suppression of the divine power of revelation and the divine power of colorless realm, all the great emperors lost their combat powers completely. On top of that, Yi Futian pressurized them with his emperor's might, causing them to be deprived of any chance to retaliate. The entire dimension seemed to be frozen. The crowds in Heavenly Imperial City who saw the happening there were dumbfounded. Under the restraint of the great emperors from Heavenly Imperial Palace, the group of arrogant foreign great emperors could not even budge an inch. Although the enemies were a group of great emperors, they were completely at the mercy of Yi Futian, Dong Huang the Great, and Hua Jiu. To think that the three of them would be so powerful after joining forces. At that time, Hua Jiu unleashed her spiritual energy with all her might and invaded the opponent's spiritual will. Yi Futian activated his ice spell to destroy their defenses. Some time had passed, but the suppression of their divine powers had not diminished. However, Hua Jiu had already gotten the information she was looking for. Her eyes narrowed into crescent shapes when she looked at Yi Futian and informed telepathically. They wanted to build a space passage to establish a connection between their universe and ours. Then they planned to let the divine power of the law of their heavenly path invade and occupy our universe. With that, they will become the sovereign of this universe. The look of Yi Futian's eyes turned icy. So these people had evil schemes after all. To think that they wanted to open a space passage between both universes. If that were to happen, they would become a greater threat than the human ancestor, since the former was a universe of cultivators. Finish them off. A murderous gleam flashed across Yi Futian's eyes. Yu Tu made his move right after Yi Futian gave the command. A pitch-black demonic blade was unsheathed and slashed the figures of those great emperors in half. Those extraterrestrial cultivators could not even defend themselves after being suppressed by the three of them. The divine power of revelation and colorless realm restrained them, causing them to be incapable of doing anything. The ominous black demonic blade could cut even the void, creating cracks in the process. Right then, the bodies of the great emperors were reduced to nothing before they could even let out a shriek after being slain. To think that the group of foreign great emperors would be exterminated on the spot. This was not the first time Yi Futian saw his godfather in action. Domineering and ruthlessness were the attributes of a demonic cultivator. The people in Heavenly Imperial City were trembling in fear after witnessing that. Even though they were great emperor plane cultivators, they were easily slaughtered without delay. The Heavenly Emperor was confident in his decision-making and would never show mercy to his enemies. Yi Futian remained composed the entire time, since they would eventually show their true colors and bring harm to this world. It would be disastrous to leave them be. Naturally, ending their lives would be the best course of action. Plus, it could serve as an intimidation to the cultivators from another universe, so that they would behave themselves a little. He did not care if doing this would offend the people from the other universe, since they had already planned to build a space passage between two universes for their conquest. It was already beyond the matter of offending the other party. If they had the capability, they would have invaded this universe by that time. Jiu, what is the cultivation system of their world? What is their overall strength? Yi Futian asked Hua Jiu. Their cultivation system is a little different from ours, but it will reach the same destination. In the end, they will have to gain enlightenment on the great path and the power of heavenly law. Their highest cultivation level is that of heavenly immortal, which is equivalent to the great emperor plane, Hua Jiu explained. However, their world is more advanced and complete than ours, like the Age of the Gods where Tianqian army would rule the world. There are different planes to their heavenly immortals. Heavenly immortal, immortal king, and supreme immortal. It looks like their immortal king is a parallel to our super great emperor. Meanwhile, their supreme immortal counterpart is our supreme being. Dong Huang the Great murmured. / please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. That should be the case. Hua Jiu nodded. The reason they want to open a space passage to our universe is so that their supreme immortal can cross over and terraform our world. According to their memories, the supreme rulers of different worlds and universes would cultivate the heavenly laws unique to their home. Therefore, they could not rule over the heavenly laws of other worlds. That's why they want to reprogram the laws of other worlds into theirs first. Yi Futian nodded. Supreme Being should be similar to the nature of his current cultivation level. He was the master of the law inside his world. For instance, he could even change the law of time in there, but he could not do the same in the outer realms or other worlds, except if he devoured that world. This might be the actual purpose of those people. The expressions of the crowd turned gloomy slightly, as they had never expected that there would be threats other than the human ancestor. And to their surprise, those people were from another universe. Gee, what do you want to say? Yi Futian questioned after noticing that Hua Jiu looked a little hesitant to speak. By right, the worlds between the universes should be isolated from one another, so they would not know the existence of other worlds. Yet it seems like our location has been leaked, Hua Jiu commented in perturbation. In other words, there might be more than one universe that would find us. Yi Futian immediately understood what Hua Jiu tried to imply. So this would be one of the results following the collapse of the Great Path. Yeah. Hua Jiu nodded. Yi Futian went silent for a while. It seemed like the only way out would be his attainment of the Supreme Being plane. In retrospect, the worry of his mother back then actually had a legitimate reason. If he could create a world with his micro-heavenly path, it would not be unthinkable to believe in the existence of the multiverse. From analyzing his inner world, he could conclude that every world and universe had its respective rules and laws. In fact, the way time would work in various universes could all be different. Since the locations of each dimension were not the same, it was nearly impossible for any of them to converge. But things had changed since the coordinate of their world had been exposed. Let's go back, Yi Futian commanded. Futian, are you going to the human realm now? Dong Huang the Great queried. That's right. Yi Futian nodded. Okay, I will meet you up at the border outside the human realm, Dong Huang the Great informed. Although he was not against Yi Futian's invasion into the enemy's territory, he would still be there as reinforcement. If anything were to befall the latter, the former could rescue him. I'm following you, Hua Jiu added. Her strength was greatly increased since she had gained enlightenment on the divine power of the colorless realm. The divine power of the colorless realm was extremely formidable, a class of its own. In the world of Buddhism, the colorless realm was above the desire realm and form realm. Colorless realm was devoid of any material form, which aligned to the Buddhist saying, "All is vanity." Hua Jiu's divine power of colorless realm was derived from her understanding of colorless realm. At the activation of the divine power, there would not be any physical matter in her world. It was absolute nothingness. This was an immensely powerful divine power that, when cultivated to its pinnacle, could wield an ability that was fundamentally equal to the peerless power of the void in essence. Nevertheless, Hua Jiu had not reached that tier as of yet. Besides, her current cultivation level was still lower than Donghuang the Great's. Okay. Yi Futian bowed his head. He could tell how powerful the divine power of revelation and colorless realm was after witnessing them earlier. So long as they did not enter the border of the human realm, the both of them would not encounter any danger. Hence, he was not worried about their safety. "All right, let's make our move now," Donghuang the Great stated. Yi Futian turned to look at the others and ordered, "The rest of you should return to the heavenly imperial palace first. We won't be gone for long." "Yes, your majesty." Everyone at the scene nodded. Yi Futian was slowly holding an absolute authority over time unknowingly, and it should be accredited to all the cultivators who had cultivated inside the world created with his heavenly path for years. The feat of creating a world was not something just anyone could pull off. If one were to look at this aspect alone, he had long since surpassed his father, Donghuang the Great. That was why everyone agreed with what Donghuang the Great had said. If there were anyone who could reach the Supreme Being plane, it would be Yi Futian. Right then, the three of them transformed into 3 dots of lights and disappeared into thin air. The people in Heavenly Imperial City who caught sight of it were taken aback and thought, "Are His Majesty and Donghuang the Great heading toward human divine palace now?" Had the power balance of the world that was divided into the 6 realms among the 6 great emperors been changed? Did the times slowly transition into the era of the rivalry between the human ancestor and heavenly emperor? The people in the world could hardly catch up with the speed of the ever-changing times. The duration was too short for the people of the outer realms. A frightening pressure permeated the entire area of the human divine palace in the human realm. An authority of heaven emanated from the top floor of the human divine palace. The human ancestor was cultivating while sitting in a lotus position. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and looked into the distance. "He is coming!" a voice could be heard from the sky announcing loudly. Following that, 3 silhouettes could be seen descending from the sky. The 3 of them had temperaments incomparable to any other. Each of them were emitting overpowering auras as if they were holding the authority of the heavens. Simultaneously, the human ancestor stood up and covered the whole human divine palace with his divine consciousness to convey a message. The entire human divine palace was heavily guarded, including the perimeter of the courtyards and the interior. All the cultivators below the great emperor plane had sought shelter inside the principal throne room of the palace complex, as they had predicted something huge was about to happen. However, the human ancestor and the gods were protecting the palace at that moment. Who could possibly make them brace themselves for the approaching enemy? Back then, Ji Wudao had invaded the human divine palace when the human ancestor was not around. At that time, the gods did not even show up yet. Suddenly, the sky above the human divine palace trembled violently, which was followed by the appearance of a spine-chilling spatial storm. The dimensional vortex blustered against the atmosphere that brimmed with an unparalleled divine power of space. A while later, the intimidating spatial storm suddenly turned into a space passage. At the other end of the space passage, a white-haired god with divine light surrounding him showed up there. The covering of the 9 dragons' true chi further enhanced his stateliness, and that silhouette was none other than Yi Futian. As he stood there silently, The atmosphere around him beamed with divine light. Just then, a phantasm manifested like the guardian of the sun and moon. He had an extraordinary temperament, making him look even better than before. With a thought, Yi Futian controlled many light dots to cross over from the other side of the space passage to the firmament above the human divine realm. The brilliant light dots appeared in multiple positions that spanned across the boundless sky like the sun, the moon, and the stars. Right after, all the lights turned into humanoid silhouettes. All these figures took the form of Yi Futian as if they were his exterior incarnations. All these dazzling silhouettes were formed with the law of the great path. One of them radiated a scorching divine light of the sun, while the other emitted a freezing divine light of the moon. They stood next to each other as if they were the representative of the sun and the moon. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. Every single one of them was the avatar of the heavenly path. Shush! The two avatars of the sun and the moon fired terrifying divine light and permeated the entire human divine palace with their powers. Immediately, they turned themselves into the sun and the moon, effusing the divine power of yin and yang while slowly covering the whole human divine palace. Whoosh! At that point, a light screen appeared in the human divine palace out of the blue. It was a sword realm. Eternal Sword Lord sat in a lotus position on top of one of the palaces. Raising his head to look at the sky, he unleashed his sword realm. The moment the divine light of sun and moon touched the sword realm, the latter was eroded. Following that, another avatar of the heavenly path hurled a glaring golden spear, while the other one threw a glowing punch at the sword realm. Immediately, the atmosphere quivered, and the sword realm was torn into pieces. Eternal Sword Lord furrowed his brows at the sight of it. Yi Futian and Dong Huang the Great had fled from the scene during the previous conflict, so he thought that his sword could eliminate that man this time. But who would have thought that Yi Futian could crush his sword realm with just a mere avatar of the heavenly path when the former's real body did not even show up yet? Lifting his head to stare at the sky, he shot divine light out of his eyes. Sword will pervaded the air when he stretched his hand to the firmament and swung it. In the blink of an eye, a sword river dispersed across the sky and charged toward Yi Futian's avatars of the great path. Then the divine power of Yin contacted the sword river, causing a freezing will to dominate the dimension as if the entire space-time was frozen. Nevertheless, it could not restrain the domineering sword. Eventually, the sword traversed in between dimensions as though it surpassed the power of time and space. Bangs similar to earth-shattering sounds could be heard when the sword collided with the avatars of the great path. While this was taking place, Yi Futian raised a sword with his hand from the other end of the space passage and thrust forward. A slash that traveled across the fabric of space-time came flying toward Eternal Sword Lord. After sensing an incoming threat, Eternal Sword Lord set up an absolute defense with the Eternal Sword domain by using his thoughts. Unfortunately, the imminent attack destroyed everything in its path, creating clanging sounds in the process before it nearly smashed the defense into smithereens. The overpowering force broke the palace hall underneath Eternal Sword Lord into pieces and eventually turned into dust. Although his body was sent flying backward, he exuded the sword will from his body. After forming sword mudras on both sides of his hands, he hurled them against the fast-approaching sword will. In that instant, a destructive sword chi tempest was stirred up in their surrounding. Boom! After a deafening bang, Eternal Sword Lord was hurled backward and crashed into many buildings and mountain peaks of the human divine palace before he was finally stuck in a corner. Nonetheless, that was not the end. Immediately, he saw countless sword will that crossed the space passage from the other side, aiming at his location as if they intended to demolish the entire human divine palace. Crash! Without warning, an ear-piercing bang was heard. The next moment, that space passage slowly disintegrated. Two silhouettes of the great emperors could be seen hovering in front of its exit point. The two of them attacked the space passage to shatter it. Even though the space passage was destroyed, eerie rumbles could be heard from time to time. All the avatars of the Great Path finally vanished from sight altogether. Although the commotion seemed to have subsided, the hearts of the cultivators of the human divine palace were still trembling in fear. All of them realized that Futian had become even stronger than before. After completing his great path, even Eternal Sword Lord could not hold a candle to him anymore. Fear was written all over the faces of the citizens residing in the central city of the human divine palace when they turned in the direction of the palace. All of them could feel the intense battle that had just taken place a while ago in the palace. It was mind-blowing to know that someone dared invade the human divine palace. Who would do something as arrogant as that? At that moment, they felt an immense pressure pervaded the atmosphere, causing them to feel suffocated and depressed. It must be a god's might. The hearts of the cultivators in the city palpitated like mad. Under the suppression of God's might, they felt like prostrating themselves with their faces and knees on the ground. After lifting their heads, they noticed a gigantic countenance that looked incorporeal in the sky. Everyone could see an exceptionally handsome face with long silver hair. It is Heavenly Emperor Futian. Their hearts were beating like a drum as they stared at Futian's stunning profile in the firmament. Back then, the human ancestor had started the War of the Six Realms to execute Futian, but failed to do so. Moreover, many of their combatants had lost their lives during Futian's counterattack. No one had expected that Futian would become so powerful when the war had only gone on for a little over 1 year, let alone seeing him invading the human realm. The countenance in the ether was the embodiment of the heavenly path, a supreme being. He was the current heavenly emperor, a man whose predecessor could not even compare. Every person in the city could sense that intense authority of heaven that pressurized the atmosphere from the sky, including the cultivators of the human divine palace. Out of the blue, they caught themselves having a false impression that Futian was the bona fide ruler of this world, the one who truly reigned over the heavenly law. Even the likes of the great Emperor Plane, cultivators felt interior in the face of his authority of heaven. The extraordinarily gifted young prodigy from Original Realm had become an existence that even the great emperors had to hold in high regard. The eye of a humongous countenance fired a magnificent divine light from the sky and turned into the sun. Then the scorching divine light of the sun that set the sky ablaze shone on the human divine palace. Swash! A powerful divine power of space transformed into a light screen and sealed the void. However, the divine light of the sun penetrated through it upon contact and continued to descend. At that time, everyone inside and outside the human divine palace was trapped in Futian's divine domain of the Great Path. He seemed to have become the supreme ruler of this realm after seizing control. Watch out! A silhouette immediately fled from the spot before the divine light of the sun beamed from above, eventually reaching the human divine palace, turning an area of the palace complex into a burning area. The light formed a pit of fire around the perimeter of the impact. Buzz! A gleam flashed across Futian's eyes. An intense divine light of the sun instantly swept across a huge part of the human divine palace, cutting everything in its path like a massive sword. The scale of the effect could easily demolish the entire palace grounds. Yet, an intimidating destructive aura permeated the sky before the figure of the human ancestor could be seen unleashing his chaotic, divine domain. After forming the Chaos True Thunder Sword, he hurled it at Futian. The entire city was shaking violently as the heavenly thunder rumbled. Raising his head, Futian set his eyes on a distant location. The moonlight shone on the Chaos True Thunder Sword, trying to freeze it. Nevertheless, the latter could not be stopped in its track, and it slipped past the constraint of the freezing power. A beam of sunlight radiated, combining its yang energy with its yin energy counterpart. As the divine light of sun and moon dazzled in the sky, it destroyed the chaos true thunder sword and headed in the human ancestor's direction with the intention of killing him. He is way too powerful. Everyone was stunned by the sight of Yi Futian, whose divine power had a radical change since they last saw him. Was that the completed divine power of the Great Path? Previously, Yi Futian did not reach the Great Emperor plane yet, but he had made it to the said tier at that time. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. How was it possible that he could fight the human ancestor equally right after he reached the Great Emperor plane? In fact, he nearly wiped the floor with the human ancestor. What a scary and incredible Great Emperor he was. If one were to compare Yi Futian with the previous 6 Great Emperors, he could very well be the strongest one of them all. Back in those days were the former Heavenly Emperor and Sovereign Princess as mighty too. Rumble. All the cultivators in the city, including the whole continent, were shivering in fright when another heavenly might suffused in the sky. They couldn't help but feel like falling to their knees. The supreme heavenly might that permeated the sky could be compared to the divine might of the Creator. Everyone who felt it bowed down in submission unconsciously. There was turbulence on the firmament above the human divine palace when the supreme heavenly might encompassed the palace grounds. Every great emperor in that place could feel a superior power looming in the area. While the ancient emperors could recognize the nature of the power, there was still a significant amount of cultivators who had just experienced it for the first time. Many combatants of the human realm were rooted to the spot and shook like a leaf. Was there a powerful being of this caliber in the human divine palace? Who was it? A magnificent divine light suddenly beamed on the human ancestor from the heavens. At that moment, the body of the human ancestor resonated with the entire realm. Meanwhile, an enormous version of his face appeared in the sky. The chaotic divine realm grew stronger steadily. It was like the power of chaos that had existed at the beginning of the universe. A roaring thunderclap, comparable to the apocalyptic divine thunder, emitted a blinding light that darkened the entire sky. Both the sunlight and the moonlight could not penetrate it. The chaotic true thunder sword accelerated further and collided with the divine light of sun and moon, emitting a sudden burst of dazzling flash. Shortly after the collision, the entire atmosphere turned dim, while the whole city shuddered from the impact. Even the Great Emperor plane cultivators quivered in panic at the sight of it. Yi Futian faced the human ancestor directly in the darkened sky. Did the latter display the true power of his real body? Yi Futian infiltrated this realm to smoke his nemesis out so that he could gauge the extent of the latter's strength. If the opposition could not stop him, he would not mind wiping the whole human divine palace off the face of the world. In fact, that was his main purpose of being here all along. However, he could sense that the real human ancestor was exceedingly powerful. Now that he had perfected his micro-heavenly path, he could even occupy a world by force and change its heavenly law into his version forcibly. In a nutshell, he could establish his heavenly path outside of his inner world. But he also believed the human ancestor could pull off a feat that would not be paled in comparison. After all, the latter had been cultivating for ages. At that time, he felt a threatening change in the atmosphere. He noticed that he was no longer holding the authority over the heavenly law of this realm. Human ancestor. Yi Futian stared at the face before him and remarked, "It seems like your real body has been here all the time." An overwhelming divine power enclosed the entire boundless realm. At the same time, the insubstantial countenance glared at Yi Futian and retorted, "After all these years, yet another of his descendant has shown up again. The world has been plunging into chaos for too long after the collapse of the heavenly path. It should be united again now. Naturally, I will lead this world into welcoming the age of the gods once more. If the Heavenly Emperor did not exist, I would have made it a reality by now. Your families have been standing in my way. So tell me, who is the one making all lives suffer here? From the former heavenly emperor to the sovereign princess, then to Yi Futian, the three had been the human ancestors' adversaries. The first two had injured him fatally, so he had been recuperating slowly for years. If Yi Futian did not exist, he would have waited for a few years and conquered the whole world in one go. Nonetheless, the reality was often disappointing. Things didn't go as he planned ever since Yi Futian had shown up. After creating a world with the micro-heavenly path, the latter changed the law of time there and used the difference between the time flow of the two worlds for cultivation. Hence, that man gradually became a threat to him. Needless to say, all the efforts and struggles of his enemies would be futile. In the end, everything would be annihilated and arrive at the end of the line. Yi Futian, if you could set aside our differences and submit to me, I could allow you to ruler over the heavenly law as my representative. You will be second to me. What do you say? He offered in an enticing tone, saying he would raise Yi Futian above all the others and make the latter the first man after him in this world. All the great emperors in the human divine palace were taken aback after hearing his words. It never crossed their minds that the human ancestor would try to subdue Yi Futian. Truthfully, the human ancestor was unsure whether he could dominate and kill Yi Futian in a fight or not. Yi Futian remained his composure after hearing the offer. The human ancestor had been calling himself the righteousness of humanity while he was ruling the human realm all those times. But was he truly the avatar of righteousness? Yi Futian had seen the hypocrisy of the human ancestor. If the latter could bring peace to the world, why would he hide in the dark? Why did he resurrect the gods instead of raising potential cultivators to emerge as the great emperors? Why would he instigate the war of the six realms by commanding the cultivators of the human realm for a conquest, which would cause all lives in the world to suffer? Whiz! A heaven-slaying spear, forged with a formidable divine power, appeared in the sky in response to the human ancestor's offer. He did that to test if the human ancestor was merely a paper tiger. It would not harm for him to try before his return. Kaboom! The spear pierced into the firmament, changing its appearance instantly and traversing the void. The chaotic true thunder sword crashed into the spear. It was pulverized into specks of dust and devoured by the latter. To think that even a sword of that caliber could not stop the spear. The firmament was smashed into smithereens and engulfed by the strike of the spear that was aiming at the humongous face. A violent storm stirred up right after the spear flew past the area. Suddenly, a colossal silhouette of a god with its head above clouds and its feet rooted to the ground appeared out of nowhere. The figure took the form of the human ancestor, who became the embodiment of the heavenly path. The spear hit hard on the divine body of the heavenly path, tearing it to tatters and intending to devour it. Yet the spear was halted by a compelling defense. Surprisingly, the overpowering spear that could engulf an entire world could not break the divine body. It was as if the attack hit on an object with the strongest defense in the world. The body of the human ancestor seemed to nullify all forms of physical attacks on the earth. Bang! A deafening sound rumble blared. The body of the heavenly immortal might have a supreme defense power, but it could not prevent the spear from quivering its figure, causing cracks to appear and piercing through it. Simultaneously, divine power gathered around the body of the heavenly immortal. At that moment, Yi Futian felt that his spear did not hit on mortal flesh, but a complete world that could not be shaken. He could sense the energy in the entire human realm accumulated in the body of the human ancestor upon impact. At that, he could not help but draw in a cold breath. His father, Donghuang the Great, had activated the Revelation Divine Matrix during the War of the Six Great Emperors, and it covered the entire continent of the Divine Prefecture. Instantly, Yi Futian knew that his father had become one with the Divine Prefecture at that time. Still, the human ancestor had somehow gone to the next level by becoming the personification of the world itself. In other words, he was indestructible. A supreme power flowed toward the human ancestor from every part of the boundless sky. At the same time, he opened both of the eyes of his towering face and glanced at the ground condescendingly, exuding an intimidating aura toward Yi Futian. Whiz! He saw a formless and incorporeal divine sword that looked like the sword of the heavenly path when an invisible power rushed toward him. Without warning, it infiltrated his spirit domain destructively. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. Yi Futian immediately let out a groan as his spirit was being attacked. The sword of the heavenly path tried to wreak havoc inside the immaterial domain and obliterate his spiritual soul. Boom! A tremendous pressure caused Yi Futian's body to fall back a little. Manifesting his face in the sky, he glared at the enormous countenance opposite him. As he had speculated, the human ancestor could come into the world already. It would not be long before the latter's comeback. This realm had become his opponent's territory. Yi Futian, even though you can alter the flow of time, your cultivation level still isn't sufficient to put up a good fight. You would escape the death penalty if you chose submission. The human ancestor's voice resounded through the atmosphere. Every cultivator in the human realm could hear his words. The people who were dispersed across the vast continent felt a violent tremor, so much so that they somehow saw the happening in the human divine palace. Although none of them could comprehend why they were seeing this, it didn't change the fact that it was happening. At that point, they had an epiphany moment that their monarch, the human ancestor, was the bona fide supreme being in this world. Even though the heavenly emperor invaded their realm, he was still a junior. The human ancestor was the cultivator who had been around since ancient times. Yi Futian shot the opposition a quick glance and turned his eyes on the gods of the human divine palace. He sighed. "Greeting, gods of ancient times. All of you had stood against the heavenly path during those days. Yet you are willing to stoop so low as to be someone else's lackeys now. I believed none of them had heard about the name of the human ancestor back then, right?" The pupils of the gods shrunk upon hearing that. Chills ran down their spines as they stared at Yi Futian. Indeed, none of them had heard of the human ancestor during the battle of heavenly laws. But times had changed, and things were nothing like what they used to be. The human ancestor had become the most powerful being in the world. He was also the one responsible for their resurrections and ruled over them. Truth be told, the gods actually had mixed feelings, as they were all individuals who had once distinguished themselves as the pinnacles in this world, all the more so for the super great emperors. When they had become elites, the human ancestor was probably still a small fry at that time. "I wish you all the best," Yi Futian uttered. Right then, his face gradually dissipated until it vanished from sight completely. Despite that, the human ancestor did not make a move at all. Obviously, he could not confine the former there. After lowering his head, the human ancestor looked at the people and affirmed, "Listen, don't be fooled by his slanderous words. I have joined forces with all of you to establish a new heavenly law, and you will be the ones who create the new world that is to come." After the human ancestor finished speaking, he enveloped the whole world with his thoughts. Instantly, everyone in the human realm could feel a supreme god's might. No matter where they were looking from, all of them could see the countenance of the human ancestor in the firmament. Peering at all the living beings on the continent, the human ancestor declared, "There are countless cultivators in the human realm, and all of them called me as the human ancestor. But there are only a handful of you people who truly know me well. During the age of the ancient heavenly path, I, too, was once a mortal human like most of you. The gods and immortals would rule over the law of the world while looking at us humans condescendingly. In the eyes of the gods who controlled the heavenly law, mortals are inferior beings. Even if we reached a high tier in cultivation, we would still be lowly to them. Even so, there were a lot of ambitious people who had set the goal to gain enlightenment on the great path and become a god. But since the age of the gods, I have always believed that humans could decide their own fate. Every cultivator in this world is the main character of the heavens. We could be comparable to the likes of the gods, even with mortal bodies of flesh and blood. After the battle of the heavenly laws, the collapse of the heavenly path happened. Many gods had died in the process, but I somehow managed to survive through the ordeal. Since then, I've made it my ultimate goal to revive the glorious age of the distant past. However, it is no longer the age of the gods, but yours. Each and every one of you can cultivate to become a god. This is also one of the things that I've put all my efforts to achieve all these years. The human realm thrived. Nevertheless, some of the conservatives grew resentful. Since the emergence of a new heavenly emperor, he has been reigning the heavenly realm and desires for the revival of the old heavenly law. An age where only the gods rule the world is not good. Although I've wished to see the restoration of the glorious days of the age of the gods, I've hoped to start anew with new heavenly law as well. Yet, the former heavenly emperor and his descendants were relentless with their hindrance to our grand plan. And it went on until the latest generation, which is Futian. He, too, is the same with his conduct. 1 year ago, I had led our legions into the heavenly realm, the land of the divine prefecture, all in the name to unite the order of the 7 realms with the sword of justice. From then, there will be no war in the world where everyone can gain enlightenment to become a great emperor. It will be a world where a mortal being can ascend to godhood and become the master of the world. Everyone will be the same, a world with perfect order, equality, and absolute justice. Nonetheless, our troops who invaded the heavenly realm and the divine prefecture lost their lives there. The top clan of the human realm, Orthodox unity, was abolished, and its people were annihilated. As you saw earlier, Futian infiltrated the human divine palace and demolished it while attempting to finish off every cultivator there. Futian, Dong Huang the Great, and the Buddha had created the Tianqian army to follow them everywhere. They are the representatives of the conservatives who care only about their personal benefits and will destroy anything and anyone that goes against their interest. Therefore, I shall bring you with me to stand up and fight. With the sword of justice in my hand, I shall conquer the 7 realms. Now, who is with me to create a new world and establish a new heavenly law? The voice of the human ancestor was Orotund. At that time, everyone in the entire human realm was greatly moved by his speech, and it created a resonance within the heavens. Suddenly, all the cultivators in that realm had a powerful urge to immediately charge toward the heavenly realm to kill the heavenly emperor, Futian. Divine light beamed from the sky of a city in the human realm, while an intangible power rested on the crowd there. The voice of the human ancestor brimmed with a mysterious power that created a resonance with everyone in the realm. Instantly, a hint of hostility flashed across their eyes. They were overwhelmed with the itch to charge toward the heavenly realm and the divine prefecture to exterminate the heavenly emperor, Futian. A voice reverberated in their minds as they raised their heads to stare at the face of the human ancestor with anger. We shall storm the heavenly imperial palace to slaughter Futian and unite the 7 realms. We will join you in your conquest, human ancestor. We will join you in your conquest, human ancestor. Similar voices echoed throughout the vast continent. All of them were willing to fight alongside the human ancestor to establish a new heavenly law. According to the narration of the human ancestor, Futian was a villain who had committed crimes against humanity. Meanwhile, the former represented absolute justice. In no time at all, Futian returned to the 99 heavens of the heavenly realm. Futian arrived above the heavenly palace together with Dong Huang the Great and Huajiu. The great emperors like Tu, Gudonglu, and the others came to the top of the heavenly palace to welcome the 3 of them back. How was everything? The string emperor asked. He finally felt a little relieved after seeing his young master's safe return. After all, the former heavenly emperor and the sovereign princess had lost their lives to the human ancestor. Thus, all of them had intense animosity toward their nemesis, the human ancestor. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. The expressions on Yi Futian and Dong Huang the Great's faces turned solemn. Then the former turned to look at the latter and questioned, "Father, what do you think of this?" "There is a high likelihood that the human ancestor refined the human realm," Dong Huang the Great replied. All the cultivators peered at Dong Huang the Great in confusion. Shortly after, the latter said, "The human ancestor had created his law of the great path. While I'm only coding the law of my own around the divine prefecture, the human ancestor had gone beyond that level. He had refined the entire human realm and changed the law of the great path in that realm completely. In short, the whole realm will be under the dominion of his will." Does that mean the human ancestor can exert his manipulation directly onto the cultivators of the human realm? Yi Futian queried. He had felt a threatening aura there previously. When the human ancestor spoke to everyone in the human realm, a resonance was created. His words had turned into the power of emotions and affected all the cultivators there. Yeah. Dong Huang the Great nodded. The human ancestor must have cultivated some unique divine power of the law. So he had been refining and assimilating with that realm all these years. In the end, he became the world itself, and all the cultivators inside will be controlled by him. As you mentioned earlier, the said resonance could allow him to exert his influence directly onto all sentient beings, including the cultivators there. In other words, a whole continent of the cultivators in the human realm will fight for the human ancestor once the war starts. The String Emperor frowned and continued, "Why did he insist on starting this war?" "I guess that has to do with his cultivation." Dong Huang the Great's expression turned grim. "I'm afraid a war on a bigger scale will be unavoidable." There were 6 legions in the 99 heavens at that moment. Still, Yi Futian hoped to prevent the war from breaking out, but not starting one. It would be better if the great emperors could settle the conflict among themselves. However, things had already gotten out of hand. What he had wished for before would never happen. When I launched an attack at the human ancestor earlier, the impact of the strike did not feel like flesh and blood, but a complete world. It looks like the human ancestor's defense in the human realm is made up of the entire realm's force. So, it will be hard to inflict any real damage to him. Yi Futian recalled the details of the clash with the human ancestor earlier. To his surprise, he could not break through the latter's defense, even with his strongest offense. Following that, he was repelled and left the human divine palace. Dong Huang the Great nodded. Since the human ancestor refined the human realm, that whole domain will become his world where he is the strongest. But once he leaves there, he will be weakened to a certain extent. That must be why he had never left the human realm, but had been dispatching his exterior incarnation outside. Yi Futian bowed his head. His expedition to the human realm this time had helped him gauge the situation of the human divine palace. The exterior incarnation of the human ancestor had the strength of the 6 great emperors. Nevertheless, he was even more powerful in the human realm. He was already invincible when he did not fully recover yet. Just how mighty would he become after his complete recovery? The other ancient emperors were at the level of the 6 great emperors, which could be compared to the super great emperor. He had confidence that he could take down the super great emperor cultivators without breaking a sweat already. Rumble. Yi Futian and the others felt a violent shaking while they were having conversation. In fact, all the cultivators in the 99 heavens could feel that intense tremor. Then they lifted their heads to look at the sky. What just happened? Yi Futian looked into a distant location of the 99 heavens. In no time, he noticed a hole torn open in the sky. It was perforated by a matchless divine power. What is going on? Everyone immediately looked at Yi Futian. The human ancestor is opening a space passage to the heavenly realm, Yi Futian stated as he stared into the distance with an expressionless look. After the space passage was built to its completion, a massive door of space could be seen appearing in the sky, which connected two different points in space-time. At the same time, a similar towering space passage showed up in the land of the divine prefecture from the human realm. The same space passage appeared even in the Western heaven world of Buddhism. The same thing happened even in the skies of the empty divine realm, the devil world, and the dark world. There was a great commotion all around the seven realms. All the cultivators raised their heads and gazed at the space passages from different locations. In that instant, they knew a great change had already taken place. The fact that the human ancestor opened the space passages that connected the seven realms would mean that he wanted to start the War of the Seven Realms. No matter who they were, no one could escape from it. In the devil world, the cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace gaped at a distant location while the Devil Abyss was roaring violently. They saw a spatial portal pierced through the Devil Abyss with an overwhelming divine power. Meanwhile, the silhouette of the Devil Emperor could be seen at the peak of the Devil Imperial Palace as he looked at that source of the ruckus. He did not let the people of the Devil world join the war because he was secretly helping his people to improve their cultivation level. Still, everything happened so quickly to the point that he could not even react to it. In just 1 year, there was a radical change in the world. A short while ago, Futian had invaded the human divine palace. The strength that he had displayed was clearly above the likes of the 6 great emperors. In his battle with the human ancestor, the latter had exhibited his almighty abilities as well. Nonetheless, the improvement of the Devil Emperor's cultivation after 1 year was unremarkable. Yu Sheng was the only person with an impressive breakthrough at his cultivation level. It should be accredited to Yi Futian, who had given Yu Sheng a spatial magical item so that the latter could use it for his cultivation for the past years. When Yi Futian first came to the Devil Imperial Palace back then, the Devil Emperor had only seen the former as a junior slowly making history. But he had never once expected to see his juniors not only make histories, but also be playing leading roles. The changes in the world were too fast for him to catch up. "Devil Emperor!" the human ancestor called from the humongous door of space. "What business do you have?" said the Devil Emperor as he looked towards the door of space. "I wish to reset the order of the 7 realms and revive the age of the gods. Would the devil world be willing to join me?" asked the human ancestor as his voice reverberated in the space. The cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace stared at the face that appeared beyond the door of space. Their gazes were filled with demonic while it was as cold as ice. The human ancestor did not hide his ambition at all. He wanted to reset the order of the 7 realms and revive the age of the gods. However, this age would be controlled by him. Now, there were already various gods under his command. "I am not interested," replied the Devil Emperor as he swept a glance at the face of the human ancestor. A cold snort could be heard. A menacing aura descended from the door of space as beams of terrifying destructive light shot out. They became chaotic divine thunder that directly filled the Devil Abyss. For a moment, it trembled violently. Countless light of catastrophe descended, causing the cultivators of the Devil world to reveal astonished expressions as they looked up at the rampaging Devil Abyss. For the cultivators of the Devil world, the Devil Abyss was both a holy land and a source of destruction. The history of the Devil world was a history of blood and tears as they struggled under the Devil Abyss. Menacing, jet-black, demonic light shot out from the Devil Emperor's pupils as he stared at the human ancestor's face. The latter continued, "I know that you can borrow the power of the Devil Abyss. However, do not forget that I can also cause it to rampage." The Devil Emperor fell silent when he heard him say this. Destructive light of catastrophe shot out from his pupils. The human ancestor had struck his weakness. If the Devil Abyss were to rampage, it would be catastrophic for the Devil world. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. For many years, the Devil Emperor had dealt with the Devil Abyss and withstood its power. Hence, it had not rampaged. "This is your justice?" asked the Devil Emperor in a tone as cold as ice. So, the human ancestors' justice was to destroy the Devil World. Do not forget the identity of the Devil World. The lands of the Devil Abyss were originally a prison, said the human ancestor indifferently. Now is the time for the Devil World to correct its name. Only by resetting the world order can the identity of the Devil World be changed. The human ancestor was clearly mocking them. The Devil World was but a prison in ancient times. As for the cultivators of the Devil World, they were merely prisoners. The only way for them to shed their status as prisoners was to reset the world order. Hence, the human ancestor invited them to join the war. The cultivators of the Devil World had always considered this to be their humiliation. Now, the human ancestor brought it up. The cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace revealed looks of rage. Demonic will roared and churned from their figures. They seemed ready to fight. However, the Devil Emperor was unusually calm. The human ancestor had found his weakness and wanted to make him compromise. He saw the insufferable arrogance of the human ancestor. This existence, which had survived since ancient times, had revealed his true colors. Nevertheless, the Devil Emperor remained silent. The human ancestor continued. Devil Emperor, the human realm, the empty divine realm, and the dark world are already amassing their armies to invade. Rally the armies of the Devil World immediately and join the war. We shall enter the lands of the heaven realm as well as the divine prefecture and unify the 7 realms. The face gradually disappeared after he said this. However, his voice could still be heard saying, "If you refuse to comply, the Devil World will receive the blessing of the Devil Abyss." This voice reverberated across the sky. The expressions of the cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace were very ugly. The human ancestor was directly threatening them. "Your Highness!" The cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace cried out as they looked up at the Devil Emperor, who was high in the sky. He remained standing there silently. His figure was tall and imposing. However, there was an air of melancholy about him. He was the domineering ruler of the Devil World, the Devil Emperor. No one in his life had ever threatened him. Yet now the human ancestor was threatening him with the lives of all in the Devil World, forcing him to submit and follow the former into battle. The Devil Emperor looked at the spatial passageway that had yet to close. He then ordered, "Summon the cultivators of the Devil World. Prepare for war." At that moment, the cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace all fell silent. They knew that His Highness, the Devil Emperor, had yielded. When the human ancestor came last time, the Devil Emperor was already prepared to fight a war. Even if they were to go to war, it would be because the Devil World wanted to do so of their own accord and not that they were threatened. That was their stance. However, this time, the Devil Emperor had compromised. It was not for himself, but for the Devil World. After giving the order, the Devil Emperor's silhouette disappeared. He came to the Devil Abyss and looked at Yushan. Now, the entire Devil World was being held hostage. They could only break the status quo if Yushan controlled the power of the Devil Abyss. From the looks of it, Yi Futian had truly foreseen that Yushan would face a huge catastrophe when he sent over the treasure. A frightening and vast army of cultivators, consisting of members from the human realm, the Devil World, the empty divine realm, and the dark world, was gathering. The forces, who had been forced back by the 6 major legions, led by Yi Futian before this, were especially eager about the upcoming war. They were all dissatisfied. Now, they had a chance to make a comeback with the power of 4 realms. They were no longer scattered forces. They had gathered together and were preparing to attack the heaven realm as well as the divine prefecture. This time, their armies would invade the heaven realm, the divine prefecture, and then the western heaven in one fell swoop. The lands of the 7 realms would finally be unified. In the human realm, from countless cities across the continents, various cultivators were traversing across the sky towards the continent where the human divine palace was located. Above the continents of the human realm, the large groups of cultivators were having discussions as they traveled. Right then, above a certain continent, a cultivator asked, "Elder Brother Wang, are you also heading over to the human divine palace?" Another cultivator replied, "How could I possibly miss such a grand occasion? This is probably a once-in-a-lifetime event." That's right. Such an opportunity only comes once over hundreds of centuries. What an honor it is to be able to personally take part. "Everyone be careful!" Someone down below called up and waved goodbye. "Friend, don't worry. When we return, the 7 realms will have been unified, and we will all be the pioneers of the new world order." A cultivator in the sky said loudly, "Farewell." As he said this, the sword beneath his feet shot across the sky, and he disappeared without a trace in an instant. Such scenes were occurring all over the human realm. They would all be fighting for justice on behalf of the human ancestor. They were going to war to unify the 7 realms and seize control of the world order. The door of space of the human realm was located outside the human divine palace. Countless cultivators had gathered in this region. They looked towards the palace with stern expressions. Many bowed respectfully as they offered up their worship. This was the cultivation court of the human ancestor. He was the god of the human realm and their faith. In the 99 heavens of the heaven realm, Yi Futian small world was also getting busy as the cultivators of the human realm were mobilizing across various continents. The human ancestor was adamant about initiating the war of the 7 realms. He also wanted to involve cultivators from all levels. No one could keep out of this war. Even though Yi Futian wanted to avoid the war, he couldn't do so. Now he could only prepare for war. As soon as he could, Yi Futian rallied the forces of the heaven realm. Dong Huang the Great did the same in the divine prefecture. They wanted to gather the Renhuang Plain cultivators to join the war. Last time, they wanted to avoid dragging others into the war. However, it was unavoidable for others to stay out of the war this time. They could only face the battle head-on. To do so, they had to first build up their strength. Renhuang Plain cultivators would be critical to this war. Yi Futian and Dong Huang the Great gathered these cultivators in the 99 heavens to train them rapidly. With the time difference, the cultivators could be trained to become top-level Renhuangs and even near deities. That way, these cultivators could serve their most crucial function in the upcoming war. After the summon had been sent out, Wu Tian Buddha Lord, Tianyin Buddha Lord, their disciples, and Chen Yi and the others were in charge of receiving those who answered the call. They would bring these people into the 99 heavens and train them in cultivation. The heaven realm, the divine prefecture, and the Buddhist sects were all busy. Similar to the cultivators of the human realm being admitted to the human divine palace, the heaven realm and the divine prefecture cultivators also rushed to the heavenly imperial city and were allowed to enter the 99 heavens. When they came to the 99 heavens, they discovered that the place was like a completely new world that had been remade. It was actually a universe on its own. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. One of the planets in this universe was like a solar furnace. It was filled with scorching currents of heat. Many great emperors and cultivators were on the planet. Their leader was the alchemy great emperor, Taoist monk Mu. This planet was an alchemy planet. It was filled with the aura of elixirs. Taoist monk Mu led the cultivators of the alchemy palace and concocted elixirs here. In another similar continent, Blind Tai was in charge of leading the members of the armoring palace in forging weapons. They manufactured large quantities of divine arms for the troops below the imperial realm. Aside from that, Blind Tai would personally forge divine arms for a group of core members. Even Yi Futian would personally forge divine arms for the top figures below the imperial realm. As for the other cultivators, they were also busy training the legions. Dong Huang the Great was personally in charge of this. Each level handled things in an orderly manner, and things were not chaotic. The closer they were to the war, the less chaotic they could be. Dong Huang the Great had experienced war firsthand. He grew up and rose to the throne during a war. He naturally knew what to do. Dong Huang, Dun, Gu Donglu, and the other commanders supported Dong Huang the Great in training the legions. Every cultivator performed their duties and did what needed to be done. In this small world, massive changes were occurring every day. A day in the outside world was equivalent to 81 days here. They were all aware that they were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers and the initiative this time. In order to stand against the human realm, they could only strengthen their core power. The 6 legions would serve as their main force, while the Runhuang Plain cultivators gathered would support them. This arrangement was their only hope of achieving victory. One of the planets was overflowing with a piercing aura. The cold gleam of weapons filled the entire planet. The aura of the great path emanating from the planet was also sharp. In front of a majestic gate, a silhouette sat cross-legged. Divine arms circled his body. Before him, a group of 1,000 cultivators was cultivating under his instruction. Powerful, sharp auras surged from their figures. Some people even seemed to transform into divine arms. To walk the path of the weapon is to be indestructible. Everything will be destroyed. Every technique will be negated, said Wang Yanbing. His gaze was as piercing as divine arms. He looked at the cultivators before him and roared. To walk the path of the weapon is to not have a body of flesh. There is only the weapon. Our bodies are our divine arms. After Wang Yanbing lost to Gu Donglu in the lower worlds, he worked even harder in his cultivation. He had cultivated the path of the weapon in the celestial gate of vast heaven and had been improving at a rapid pace. Although he wasn't as powerful as Gu Donglu, he still clearly knew what he wanted and ceaselessly pursued after his own path. Now, he was teaching the other cultivators how to cultivate like a grandmaster. There was a continent of monstrous beasts nearby. This continent was full of monstrous auras. Although various monsters were cultivating, it was very organized. All the monstrous beasts were working hard to improve themselves. There were many powerful divine beast bloodlines, such as the Dragon Clan, the Divine Elephants, and the Pung Bird Clan. The elders of the Dragon Clan, the Sky Demon Court, and the Divine Elephants were in charge of training the troops of the monstrous beasts. There were a few super powerful monsters on the Demon God Mountain of this continent. Their leader was actually Little Condor. His gaze was sharp as he glanced in all directions. Beside him was a phoenix. They were in charge of the troops of the Demon Clan. Aside from these 2 continents, there was another planet in their vicinity. They were all under the Heavenly Mandate Legion, one of the 6 legions under the command of Gu Donglu. Be it Wang Yanbing or Little Condor, they were all part of this legion. This segmentum was called the Heavenly Mandate Segmentum. On the main planet of the Heavenly Mandate Segmentum, Gu Donglu was in the current Heavenly Mandate Academy. Right now, many people were with him. Do Zhao, Xiaomuyu, Longchen, Jun, and the others were all here. They now served as Gu Dongliu's aides, supporting him in managing the Heavenly Mandate Legion. "How are the troops?" asked Gu Donglu as he glanced at the others present. He was now a super cultivator. He should not need to inquire on the cultivation of those under him. However, these were desperate times. They needed to amass an army for war. Even great emperors took part in the training of the legions. Xiao Muyu reported, "These past few days have been extremely hectic. However, we have now established an order. Everything is beginning to fall into place and can run on its own. That way, even if more and more people come from the outside world, we can still rapidly absorb them into the training regime and make them part of our combat power." "I am looking forward to the start of the battle," said Do Zhao somewhat excitedly. The Do tribe had always enjoyed battles. This was in their blood. "Demon God Planet is on track too," added Longchen. Responded Gu Donglu as he nodded his head. "Do not get careless. This time, the enemies we are facing are like none the heavenly mandate realm have encountered before. They are all of the top forces of the human realm, the empty divine realm, and the other realms. Any one of these forces could have easily crushed all the cultivators of the heavenly mandate realm in the past. We are not what we once were. How can you compare us to our past selves now? Said Do Zhao confidently. He was also one of the core members and had always received the best cultivation resources. His abilities were very powerful now. In terms of numbers, we are at an absolute disadvantage. The legions we are training need to be able to overwhelm the opponent and strike fear in their hearts, replied Gudonglu. Fear not. We will certainly make it happen, answered Do Zhao confidently. Time trickled past. The cultivators who were training in Yi Futian's micro-world utilized every second to improve their cultivation and to break through to the next plane. However, some of them chose not to break through to the Imperial realm even though they were qualified to do so. It was because they wished to contribute to the battlefield as those under the Imperial realm. By the time the forces of the human realm and their allies had completed their preparations for war in the outside world, a few decades had passed. On this day, Yi Futian and a few cultivators gathered at the heavenly palace. Wutian Buddha, Lord, said to Yi Futian, "The western heaven has been invaded by the armies of the dark world and the empty divine realm. I need to rush back there with my troops." The Buddhist sects had been able to seize more time for cultivation in the micro-world. As a result, the Arhot Legion had grown stronger. It was time for them to return and join the war now. Buddha Lord, please lead the Arhot Legion to join the war in the Western Heaven. On top of that, I will assign the Four Corners Legion to go with you. You may order them as you see fit, Yi Futian replied. It was still rather challenging for the members of the Western Heaven to fight against the invasion of two major worlds, the Dark World and the Empty Divine Realm, alone. The commanders of the Four Corners Legion were the four disciples of Yi Futian. Among them were Fong Siyuan and Tai Tu. Fong Siyuan, Yi Futian called. Yes, master. Fong Siyuan appeared even more charming now with his long hair. Nevertheless, his temperament was calm. He was no longer the inexperienced lad like he used to be. Even though not much time had passed in the outside world, he and his friends had been cultivating for more than 100 years in the micro-world. Therefore, he had had 100 years of training to hone himself. Yi Futian ordered, "The four of you, lead the Four Corners Legion and the troops under your command to aid the Buddhist sects in war. Obey the commands of the Buddhist sections." "Yes, master," Fong Siyuan replied while nodding. Then he bowed towards Wutian Buddha Lord and said, "I will surely obey the commands of Buddha Lord." Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. Amitba. Wutian Buddha Lord put his palms together as a gesture of gratitude. "The four of you, leave with Buddha Lord," Yi Futian commanded. Immediately, the four of them went to summon their troops for departure. The cultivators from the world of Buddhism also left the micro-world one by one. 2 legions had been sent off to assist the Western Heaven in war. "Father, let the Revelation Legion, led by Diuan, and the Ziwei Legion, led by Emperor Chen, aid the members of the Divine Prefecture in war," Yi Futian said while looking at Donghuang the Great. Not long ago, the troops of the Devil World had entered into the space passage that connected their world and the Divine Prefecture. They were now stationed at the North Cliff region. The Devil World and the Divine Prefecture were next to each other. Hence, the troops of the Devil World were in charge of occupying the Divine Prefecture. Yi Futian did not wish to fight against the troops of the Devil World. However, things had not gone as he wanted. The troops of the Devil World chose to participate in the War of the Seven Realms and were about to attack the Divine Prefecture. Donghuang the Great nodded in agreement as he said, "The troops of the Devil World are powerful. It will be a brutal fight. From the looks of it, our fight with them is inevitable. Dong Huang the Great did not wish to engage in war with the Devil World either. He had a lot of respect for the Devil Emperor, and the two of them admired each other. Nevertheless, they were destined to be enemies due to their different stances. If Dong Huang the Great had a choice, he would choose to be friends with the Devil Emperor. How he wished the two of them could chit-chat and play Weiqi together peacefully, just like what they did last time when the Devil Emperor visited Dong Huang Imperial Palace. The Devil Emperor was the overlord who withstood the tribulations of the Devil Abyss on his own. The entire Devil World rested on his shoulders. This time, the human ancestor used the welfare of the members of the Devil World to threaten the Devil Emperor. The latter was forced to declare war on the Divine Prefecture to preserve his people's lives. Yi Futian could still strive to get the Devil World to side with him if the human ancestor had not done so. The situation might have been different if they could postpone the war until Yu Sheng had seized control of the Devil World. This was also Yu Tu's intention. He had set up things so that one day the forces of the Devil World and the Divine Prefecture could both be utilized by Yi Futian. Diyuan, Dong Huang the Great called, "Lead the Revelation Legion and head back to the Divine Prefecture." "Yes, Father," Dong Huang Diyuan responded while nodding. Even though she was the descendant of Emperor Yi Qing, she had been raised by Dong Huang the Great since birth. The latter had treated her like his own child. Even up until now, her surname was still Dong Huang. Hence, she still called Dong Huang the Great her father. In her eyes, both Dong Huang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing were her fathers, with the former being her foster father, while the latter being her biological father. Dong Huang Diyuan left the palace. Yi Futian then assigned Emperor Qin, formerly known as Lord Chen, to lead the Ziwei Legion and join Dong Huang Diyuan. After 4 legions had departed to the Western Heaven and the Divine Prefecture, there were only 2 legions left behind. They were the Heaven Court Legion and the Heavenly Mandate Legion. The former consisted of forces from the original Heaven Realm, while the latter was made up of cultivators following Yi Futian since the beginning. Yi Futian had ordered the 6 major legions to go to separate battlefields because their opponents were no longer fighting alone this time. They had dispersed their armies. All the space passageways were now open. This time, the allied forces of the human realm and the other 4 realms would most likely strike in tandem. This meant that the Heaven Realm, the Divine Prefecture, and the Western Heaven would be thrown into war simultaneously. Hence, Yi Futian had no choice but to distribute the 6 major legions across the 3 different worlds. The cultivators of the Heaven Realm could see the troops of the human realm gathering at the other end of the space passageway. The latter were all garbed in green clothes. They used this method to distinguish their own members. Once the war erupted, the world would be thrown into chaos. If they did not standardize their outfits, they would not be able to differentiate between their own members. In the Heavenly Imperial City, the Heaven Court Legion and the Heavenly Mandate Legion had lined up in formation. Their gazes were fixed on the space passage, and they were all ready for war. All the cultivators in the Heavenly Imperial City were looking up at the sky. Now, there were very few people left in the city. Most of them had evacuated. Just then, a cultivator took off his green robe and threw it up into the air. A mass of flames incinerated the green robe. When they saw this scene, others in different parts of the city took off their green robes and also threw them up in the air, burning them. In an instant, the sky above the city was ablaze with burning robes. If they wore green robes, they might have the opportunity to infiltrate the enemy camp and make it out alive. They could even betray the Heaven Realm and join the human realm. This was bound to happen, and many people would certainly do so. However, many people still burnt their robes in public. This was a wordless oath. They burnt their robes and were prepared to fight. "They are coming," someone said. Just then, intense tremors came from the space passage in the sky. A vast army appeared on the other side of the passageway. They were prepared to enter the door of space and invade the Heaven Realm. Below the space passage, 2 legions were waiting with serious expressions. The 6 legions, including their main forces and the troops they had trained, were 1,000,000 strong. Each legion had more than 100,000 cultivators. This was a terrifying number, but it was minuscule on the current battlefield. Their numbers were still too few. 100,000 cultivators were too pitiful to guard a world. For the heavenly imperial city alone, such a number was insignificant. In the world today, some larger forces already had such numbers. Even so, they had no choice but to fight. Beneath the space passage, the troops were in formation. Each troop was separated. Right now, among the crowd, an intense, piercing aura emanated from a troop. They were actually carrying bows and arrows. The leader was imposing and handsome. On his back was a divine bow that Futian had personally forged for him. The atmosphere in the heavenly imperial city was exceptionally serious and depressing. The human ancestor set up the space passage above the heavenly imperial city. He would invade the place and directly declare war. Rumble. A dull and terrifying sound could be heard. The space passage expanded, and the entire sky became a door of space. Menacing divine power emanated from within it as it blocked out the sun. Dark clouds loomed over the city. "They are coming," someone said. Everyone in the heavenly imperial city looked up into the sky. At that moment, it was as though the end of the world had come. Everyone's hearts were beating intensely. Some cultivators had powerful battle intent circling their figures. This invasion was different from the last. This time, the human ancestor rallied all the cultivators of the human realm to invade the heaven realm. He wanted to unify the 7 realms. In the heavens above, beams of divine halos descended from the door of space like sky stairwells. Then a vast army surged out from within and appeared in the sky above the crowd. The army of the human realm had descended. In an instant, the vast army immediately appeared above the heavenly imperial city, blocking out the sky. Tens of millions of troops had invaded the heaven realm. "They are here," someone said. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. The Heaven Court Legion and the Heavenly Mandate Legion had long been in formation. They had divided themselves into many smaller divisions and had been awaiting this moment. In the Archer phalanx, endless dazzling light lit up right then. The light illuminated the sky. An unparalleled divine bow appeared behind Huang Joga. At full draw, the bow seemed to shoot out a divine ray of the sun up into the heavens. The divine power of the arrow scorched the space as it became a beam of sunlight that shot up into the sky. As one of the first few people who followed Futian wouldn't mistreat Huang Joga. Futian directly baptized the latter with his divine power of the law, complementing Huang Joga's natural talent. This allowed Huang Joga to comprehend the divine power of the sun. Now, Huang Joga was already at the near-deity plane and was a top-tier existence below the great emperors. Futian also personally forged a divine bow called Sun Chaser for him. It was an imperial arm compatible with the divine power of the sun. At that moment, an extremely threatening aura reached the sky. Around Huang Joga, other divine archers had also drawn their bows. Buzz! The divine power of the sun formed arrows that pierced and lit up the sky. They seemed to penetrate the darkness and brought the light of dawn. "Be careful!" An astonished voice cried out in the sky. The divine arrows of the sun shot over in a flash. The cultivators of the vast army had just arrived. Before they could even react, countless cultivators perished before the divine arrows of the sun and were instantly turned to ashes. A sharp aura similarly erupted in the phalanx where Wang Yanbing was. The various cultivators that he led transformed into tens of thousands of divine arms and took to the skies simultaneously. There was nothing they could not destroy nor negate. They charged into the sky and also slaughtered many cultivators. The other cultivators also unleashed wave after wave of long-range attacks in tandem, killing many enemy forces. They caused the formation of the cultivators who had just arrived to fall into disarray. This caused the mighty army to fall into chaos. Huang Zhouge kept launching volleys of arrows. The divine arrows of the sun shot out again and again, killing tens of thousands of cultivators. However, the enemy forces seemed endless as they swarmed out of the door of space. As more and more of them poured out, cultivators covered the skies above the heavenly imperial city. Rumble. With a loud rumble, the divine arrows of the sun encountered a considerable resistance. Then a shower of meteor swords rained down, along with a menacing meteorite shower, as well as bolts of destructive thunder and lightning. The top figures who were swarming out were beginning their counterattack. The cultivators in the sky above came charging down, suppressing them. They were all wearing green robes and unleashed the first wave of destructive attacks. In the sky above the heavenly imperial city, terrifying destructive power clashed. It was like the actual scene of the end of the world where the heavens and earth were collapsing. "Attack!" one side cried out. "Attack!" the other side responded. The sounds of slaughter reverberated throughout the space. This war was a war to end all wars. The last war paled in comparison, be it in terms of scale or cruelty. Outside the micro-world, Yi Futian stood there looking towards the battlefield. Beside him were the various emperors. All of them did not participate in the battle. The great emperors of the human realm had not arrived yet. The cultivators below the imperial realm started the fighting first. "I wonder how many people will survive this war," said Zhuge Mingyue in a low voice next to Yi Futian. Her voice contained a melancholic tone. She had always been an optimistic person. However, this time she still felt pessimistic. This was a war that would destroy the world. An army of more than 1,000,000 troops descended upon the heavenly imperial city and charged towards them. This would be the greatest calamity in the history of the 7 realms up to date. Countless cultivators would become martyrs for the heaven realm. Those who made it out alive would be very lucky. Yi Futian had a heavy heart as he looked over the battlefield. The army of the human realm was already clashing with the legions of the heaven realm. Inside the destructive storm, many people were killed every second. It was tragic. "Will Big Brother be all right?" Zhuge Mingyue asked Yi Futian. Their big brother had also participated in this battle. Big Brother initially had the opportunity to become a great emperor, yet he did not push to achieve it. He had been preparing for this war instead. "He will be fine," replied Yi Futian as he looked towards a corner of the battlefield. Over there, Sword Saint was wielding a destructive demonic blade. He slashed out again and again. Each slash shook the heavens and the earth, ripping apart the sky. He slaughtered his way through the green-robed army of the human realm alone. The demonic blade that slashed out was a saber technique of the devil world. You too personally taught him this. Bang! Right then, a terrifying sword of the divine human slashed out and clashed with Sword Saint's demonic blade. This caused the light of his saber to be extinguished. Sword Saint was knocked back a short distance. He looked up at the green-robed cultivator in the sky. The person had extraordinary temperament and appeared extremely young. "The sword of the divine human!" exclaimed Sword Saint as he looked at the other party. This person should be a direct descendant of the human ancestor. The cultivator was from the human divine palace. He was one of the human ancestor's disciples. His ability was very powerful. He also came over here when he saw Sword Saint massacring his way through their troops. Rumble. Terrifying demonic will churned and roared. Powerful demonic will surged from Sword Saint's figure and was extremely domineering. He stepped up into the sky. The demonic blade in his hand cleaved out. The jet-black light of the saber split the sky apart, cleaving a crack in the space. In another location, Do Xiao wielded a gigantic golden staff. He unleashed the strongest form of the will of the fighting god. It was as though he had become a war god. The staff in his hand danced and shattered the figures of the cultivators it struck, disintegrating their souls. Near Do Zhao, there was a woman wielding the divine sword of annihilation. Blood splattered like rain everywhere she passed. Everywhere the divine sword went, no one made it out alive. The woman wielding the sword actually had a face that could launch 1,000 ships. This woman was the daughter of Emperor Nan Luotian. She was of the same generation as Do Zhao and Xiaomu. Back in the heavenly mandate realm, she was also a very outstanding figure. Now, this group of people had grown to become the core power of the legions. The army of the Devil World began invading the Divine Prefecture from the North Cliff region. On the continent, black clouds covered the sky above a city. The members of the Devil World filled the skies. Tens of millions of troops of the Devil World began their invasion of the Divine Prefecture. In an extremely short amount of time, the fires of war set the vast continent ablaze. Due to the entire army of the Devil World beginning their invasion from the North Cliff region, the Divine Prefecture utilized guerrilla tactics and did not face them head-on to block them off. The army of the Devil World had powerful explosive force. If the members of the Divine Prefecture were to take them head-on, the outcome would be tragic. Hence, the cultivators of the Divine Prefecture kept sending cultivators with powerful cultivation and those proficient in the power of space or speed to harass the enemy's operations. However, in the face of absolute power, all this was futile. Of course, even with millions of troops, the Devil World still had to disperse its forces. The cultivators of the Divine Prefecture watched how their opponents prepared to move and then decided on how to counter them. At the same time, the Western heaven world of Buddhism had a different approach. After the Buddhist sects knew that the forces of the Dark World and the empty divine realm were invading, they immediately gathered up their forces, including the Arhat Legion and the Four Corners Legion, and joined the battlefield. In the lands where the two major worlds invaded, the most devastating clash erupted. The Buddhist sects had many members. They were devoted to their faith. They would not allow the cultivators of the Dark World to desecrate the world of Buddhism. They had paid a terrible price the last time the Dark Army invaded. This time, a resistance of a much larger scale erupted. The clashes were even fiercer. The world of Buddhism was ablaze with the fires of war. In the sky above the battlefield, there were the Buddha lords. They had their palms together as they recited Buddhist scripture. They were releasing the souls of the fallen from suffering, allowing them to be reincarnated. This time, the 7 realms were all dragged into this war. No one could stay out of it. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. On the battlefield in the Heaven Realm, Nan Luotian was fighting against a disciple of the human ancestor. Her divine sword of annihilation was suppressed by the other party. Even though this disciple of the human ancestor was not as powerful as Dihao, he was a top figure. Nan Luotian received personal guidance from Yi Futian, and she merged his divine power of the law into her techniques to attain her current combat ability. However, she still felt great pressure when facing such a strong opponent. An empty space surrounded the two of them. The others stayed away from them for fear of being affected by the aftershock of their attacks. Right now, a menacing and gigantic sword descended from the sky. It contained the power of the human realm. Dazzling green divine halos burst forth from the sword of Nan Luotian as it collided head-on with the falling sword. A destructive storm swept out and covered the heavens and the earth. She was forced to take a step back. Buzz, a beam of lightning charged towards the disciple of the human ancestor. Emperor Nan, father of Nan Luotian, had joined the fight. His swordsmanship had further transformed, and it was purer now. His sword charged forward boldly, as though it was the first sword created since mankind existed. Dong! A loud sound could be heard. A massive divine seal blocked the path of the sword. The divine seal covered the sun and the sky as it radiated golden divine halos. It contained the divine force of space, and it attempted to shatter the sword of Emperor Nan. However, the latter dazzled with brilliant green divine halos, and the divine seal was immediately shattered. The sword continued to bulldoze its way through with great momentum. Their opponent transformed into a divine human. He was imposing and was akin to a real god. He pointed a finger forward and touched the sword of Emperor Nan. The power from his finger caused the sword to him and shake vigorously. Swoosh! A shrill sound reverberated in space as cracks propagated on the finger of the divine human. Emperor Nan's body was pushed backward too. The father and daughter duo stood side by side as they looked at the cultivator before them. "Are you all right?" Emperor Nan asked. Nan Luotian nodded her head slightly. The two of them joined forces on the battlefield. In another location, Dou Zhao charged forward fearlessly and slaughtered his way into the opposing armies. Everywhere he passed, no one was spared. He swung his golden staff as he moved, and many cultivators were killed by it. Suddenly, terrifying thunder befell him. It was the chaotic divine thunder. When Dou Zhao's staff came in contact with the thunder, the former was corroded right away. The thunder was not shattered. Instead, it flowed along with the staff and entered Dou Zhao's body, causing him to go numb. Even his spiritual soul shook violently due to the shock. Dou Zhao stopped advancing. He raised his head to look at the figure pouncing towards him. The incoming opponent was a middle-aged man. His pupils were purple, and they glistened with the divine power of thunder. His eyes could directly affect the will of others. Swoosh! An ear-piercing sound rang. A thunder invaded the eyes of Dou Zhao. The middle-aged man could affect the minds of others, since his power of thunder could target spiritual souls. His mental attack was perfect to counter Dou Zhao's domineering physical attack. The middle-aged man extended his arms, and streaks of lightning descended from the sky. He summoned Futian divine thunder and turned the vast space into his thunder domain. A brilliant divine light shone on Dou Zhao's glabella. His spiritual imprint radiated, and his will of the fighting god was activated to its maximum limit. His body grew larger, and his mind grew tougher so that he would not be perturbed by the thunder. Rumble! He swung his staff, and the entire sky shook. Rumbling sounds could be heard reverberating in space. As he moved the staff back and forth, an overbearing power was generated. It then blasted towards the other party. The space was shattered, and the heavens and the earth hummed. Right at the same time, thundering sounds reverberated. Futian divine thunder rained down and overwhelmed the space. The thunder crashed into Dou Zhao's staff and body. It further attacked his spiritual soul. This time, Dou Zhao was protected by the will of the fighting god. The will surrounded his spiritual soul as divine light flowed all around his body. Futian divine thunder hit his body, but he activated his power to its maximum capacity and overcame the limitation of his flesh. Dou Zhao continued to pounce towards his enemy despite the numbness he felt all over his body. When he struck out, his arm vibrated violently. Power surged from every inch of his body, and all of it was channeled into his attack. Even when both he and his staff were bathed in terrifying thunder, Dou Zhao still managed to land a critical hit on his opponent. Rumble! The staff whacked the middle-aged man, causing him to be smashed into gory pulp. He was annihilated. However, right after Dou Zhao killed the man, a group of cultivators moved towards him simultaneously. Even before they approached him, their Futian divine thunder flooded the sky. Divine might pressed down from the sky as endless divine thunder gathered around him. The thunder charged towards his figure like chains. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Countless chains of lightning swept out into the space and circled Dou Zhao's figure. They ignored everything in their path and struck his body. Dou Zhao's power was activated to his limits. However, when the terrifying lightning burst forth, it kept eating away at his flesh. In the heavens above, powerful figures descended. They seemed to be from the same force. They all cultivated the divine power of thunder. It was as though they were various gods in charge of Futian divine thunder. They stood above everyone in the sky above. They were all cultivators from the human divine palace. Dou Zhao sensed their power. He realized that this war was different from what he had imagined. The human divine palace, under the rule of the human ancestor, had numerous cultivators from different temples, and their cultivation abilities differed as well. This group of cultivators specialized in the divine power of thunder. When their divine power exploded, chains of thunder and lightning encircled Dou Zhao's body like dancing snakes. Dou Zhao's body trembled slightly as his spiritual soul was under attack. Boom, boom, boom. Shocking sounds of thunder came out one after another, and a phantom figure manifested behind each cultivator in that group. These phantoms were transformed by thunder and lightning, and they were akin to gods of thunder. At this moment, men and gods stood shoulder to shoulder. What was more terrifying was that these phantoms resonated with one another, so that a truly majestic god appeared in the void, standing between heaven and the earth. Countless chains surrounded his body, and dazzling thunder light burst from the torso of this god. Then this light blasted on Dou Zhao, causing Dou Zhao's spirit soul to tremble. His spiritual soul seemed to come out of the body, facing a true god as he was bound by chains. Loosen! As Dou Zhao let out a roar, the will of the fighting god was pushed to the limit, striving to surpass the limit. A towering phantom of the fighting god appeared behind him as the divine power roared fiercely, trying to block the corrosion of that divine power. If he didn't do so, he would be in a dire situation where he would lose his combat effectiveness and be killed in a most miserable fashion. Before the battle, Dou Zhao was pretty confident that he would be invincible no matter who he fought. However, at this moment, not long after the battle started, he encountered trouble already. He realized that the power he met in the human realm was like nothing he had faced before. This was an invasion of this side of the world, and the invading side also had many top figures. Boom! The golden long stick in Dou Zhao's hand exploded with astonishing divine power, with a blinding imperial glory blooming. The will of the fighting god resonated with it, madly urging its power. The divine stick slammed out and swept across an entire corner of the sky. But even as the long stick blasted out, those destructive chains of thunder were still locked onto him and his long stick, weakening its power. Beams of thunder slammed down, hitting that golden long stick, blocking its power and pinning Dou Zhao where he was, completely restricting his ability to fight back. At this time, a dull sound came out, faintly accompanied by the sound of dragon chiming, resounding throughout the void. Long Chen was now on the move. He brought the power of the dragon god with him as he unleashed the golden dragon fist. The fist will turned into purple golden dragons that emerged with angry howls. They attacked the cultivators bathed in the thunder, trying to give Dou Zhao a chance to free himself. Those cultivators glanced at Long Chen, and immediately countless lightning bolts slammed down on those purple golden dragons, entangling them, thus weakening the dragons' power considerably. Their divine power was directly affected, and this even cut the divine power of the others. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. Buzz. The moment they attacked Long Chen, golden lightning flashed across so fast that they couldn't be sure what it was. Those chains of thunder that lashed out violently could not catch up with their target. Soon after, a golden divine light struck out, splitting the thunder into two. But that golden lightning was wings of feather from the divine wings of the golden-winged rock. It was June who attacked, killing one person with one blow. He had cut off the head of some cultivator. His speed was already faster than thunder and lightning, and he had beheaded his opponent under the opponent's thunderous attack. June's body was suspended in the void, and the wings behind him bloomed with imperial glory as if they were cast by divine arms. Every feather was like an extremely sharp divine weapon, and their emergence sobered up the other cultivators immediately. Bang! Another dull sound came out, and the figure of the divine elephant appeared above them. As soon as it stepped into the void, an incomparably terrifying divine power suddenly came down to suppress this corner of the sky. Kill! Do Xiao roared as he broke free. The long stick in his hand slammed upward against the momentum. At the same time, Long Qin blasted out the Dragon God Fist, which was domineering and powerful. As Jun's body sailed across the void and turned into lightning, the divine elephant stepped into the void to suppress the corner of the sky and launched its attack as well. All of them bloomed with their own incomparably terrifying divine powers, and each one of them was a near-deity existence. Yi Futian knew that no matter how powerful these 6 major legions were, they were too few in number, especially lacking in advanced combat power at the top. Therefore, in the days before the human realm was about to launch their official invasion, he had deliberately given special training to these 6 major legions. Core members, such as the cultivators who had followed him from the heavenly mandate realm, were directly baptized by the divine power of the micro-heavenly path. Even before that, Yi Futian had helped them reshape their talents, using the divine power to wash their bodies and spiritual souls. The paths they were cultivating now were not the path of the outside world, but the path that belonged to Yi Futian alone. They were like the 8 legions under the throne of the heavenly path. Yi Futian represented the heavenly path of the small world, and they were its direct descendants. Therefore, the combat power of this group of people was awesome, and this was their only advantage. The direct baptism of the divine power of law endowed these top cultivators with massive combat effectiveness. To a certain extent, although the number of the army from the heaven realm was far less than their opponent, this batch of top figures was not any less excellent compared to the other side. On this battlefield, they quickly gained the upper hand, suppressing their opponents. Even though some more cultivators from the other side came as reinforcement, Jun and the others worked in tandem and soon immolated all the cultivators here. But even so, looking at the entire battlefield at a glance, they were still being outnumbered by the invading army of the human realm. There were simply too many people, and there was a huge gap between the numbers of cultivators involved. The human ancestor launched the power of the human realm to invade, and cultivators continued to emerge wave after wave. Then they pressed onward to Heavenly Imperial City, attacking different locations inside the city. Blood spilled wherever they passed and slaughtered. The sight was extremely horrific to behold. There was a sacred figure clad in a white dress on the battlefield. She was like a tree of life as countless branches and leaves spread out from her body. She possessed an extremely powerful life force. Whenever someone was injured, the divine power of life would pour into the wounded and restore their vitality. Thus, lives were revived and flesh grew over the bones. As long as they were not injured by the same or an even more powerful divine power, they could be rescued and restored to health if they did not die. This was the magnificence of the divine power of life. This woman in white was Xia Qingyuan. She moved through the battlefield, constantly saving and resuscitating injured cultivators, but it was useless. With just her alone, it seemed that whatever she was doing was only a drop in the bucket. Moreover, in most cases, those cultivators were being killed outright, so there was no chance of rescuing them. Blood gradually stained her clothes. Xia Qingyuan, who was traveling through the battlefield, felt the fragility of life, and there was a deep sadness in her heart. She was also the princess of Emperor Xiao's realm, and she had experienced her share of battles. However, this was the first time she experienced a war of such brutality. It was a battle between millions of cultivators who slaughtered one another in frenzied fights. The scene was simply too terrifying. Buzz! The golden spear pierced through the void and attacked Xia Qingyuan. Someone noticed Xia Qingyuan, who kept resuscitating the injured and restoring their combat effectiveness instantly. Of course, such a person must be killed. Bang! The golden spear came crashing down. But before it hit Xia Qingyuan, it shattered and pulverized. It was smashed by a long rod surrounded by divine flames. Not far above Xia Qingyuan, a ferocious and domineering demon was standing there. It was Zhu Yan the Beast, who had once fought against Yi Futian. Behind him stood the principality of the Demon Ape clan from the Heavenly Mandate realm. They spread out and formed a line of defense as a ferocious aura erupted from them. They held long rods in their hands. They were standing in battle formation as if they were guarding and ensuring Xia Qingyuan's safety. Above the firmament, a group of cultivators dressed in blue was surrounded by golden radiance as they descended from the sky, looking extremely keen. These were the cultivators from the human divine palace. Like golden gods of war, they carried absolute dominance. The golden rays of light sprinkled down as those sharp divine arms came down for the kill, cutting through the void. Zhu Yan the Beast and other demonic cultivators resonated with the energy. He held the long rod and launched it high into the sky, which contained a supreme power. It shattered the void and blocked that group of incoming cultivators. Xia Qingyuan glanced at the battlefield. Her robe fluttered. She continued with her task, rushing in another direction as the divine power of life enveloped the boundless space, continuing to heal the wounded. Buzz! Another spatial divine light pierced through the void. It was aimed at Xia Qingyuan. Although Zhu Yan and other great demons had blocked one group of attackers, many had taken notice of Xia Qingyuan by now and wanted to kill her. Quite a few top figures were trying to get to her themselves. The spatial divine light directly penetrated the void and pierced through the bodies of several cultivators. However, it continued moving forward, and its aim never veered from Xia Qingyuan. However, almost at the same moment, a terrifying gigantic palm print blasted down and collided with the divine light in the void. Suddenly, a violent sound came from the space, which could be heard clearly in the surrounding areas. An extremely tyrannical aura permeated, and another group of cultivators appeared behind Xia Qingyuan. These cultivators turned into a battle matrix and moved forward. Until now, they had not made a move. It seemed that their job was to solely protect Xia Qingyuan. Xia Qingyuan was a little surprised by this as well. She turned around to look and recognized the people protecting her from behind. They were the cultivators from the Lost Clan. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. The cultivators of the Lost Clan had been included in the great army of Heavenly Mandate. This force was capable of competing with the forces from all sides in the past, and after Yi Futian's training, their strength had been further improved. Furthermore, they had gone through the test of battles and had been on the edge of death many times over before they were able to return to the land of the original realm. Their resilience was tried and true, and such a force was protecting her. Xia Qingyuan suddenly found that a complex emotion filled her heart. Of course, she knew who had arranged all this. Who else could have commanded such a mighty force? In a major battle like this, everyone was standing in the middle of life and death, and no one had absolute certainty of their survival. On the raging battlefield, there was such a powerful force like this protecting her. Could this be a way of gauging her importance in his heart? Or maybe because he felt that he owed her. Everyone, don't worry about me. This is a waste of your combat power. Xia Qingyuan turned around and said to the cultivators of the Lost Clan. Being a top cultivator herself with strong combat effectiveness, a mighty team such as the Lost Clan should not be wasted guarding her. Princess Xia has powerful healing ability and plays a great role on the battlefield. Of course, we must ensure the princess' safety, an elder from the Lost Clan replied. Princess, just focus on doing what you do best. Don't pay any attention to us. This kind of explanation somehow seemed to make sense. However, the situation on Xia Qingyuan's side seemed to have attracted the attention of many people. In the sky above the battlefield, a group of cultivators from the Divine Palace were watching Xia Qingyuan closely. They realized that Xia Qingyuan seemed to be the only one on the battlefield who enjoyed some security, while no one else enjoyed the same kind of privilege. More importantly, she was an expert at the divine power of life and possessed a very powerful ability to heal. Kill her! Above the firmament, a dull sound rang out, resounding throughout the battlefield. Suddenly, many cultivators looked in Xia Qingyuan's direction. For a time, mighty cultivators swarmed in Xia Qingyuan's direction, turning into a fearsome army. The great army of Heaven Court and the great army of Heavenly Mandate also noticed this movement, as they focused their attention on Xia Qingyuan's direction as well. Many cultivators were turning to Xia Qingyuan as the new target, especially those cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Army. They all knew that Yi Futian had a special relationship with Xia Qingyuan. Once upon a time, Yi Futian had first emerged out of Emperor Xia's realm and was cared for by Emperor Xia and Xia Qingyuan. The two of them spent a lot of time together, and many people thought they were a couple. Blinding and dazzling divine lights pierced through the battlefield, and they turned out to be a series of arrows. Huang Zhouge had led a group of cultivators to cover the sky with arrows. These divine arrows traversed heaven and earth continuously and took out many cultivators instantaneously. Those cultivators above the firmament turned into balls of fire and fell from the sky. The sight was astoundingly tragic. However, this turn of events further accentuated the importance of Xia Qingyuan. Cultivators from the human divine palace converged in this direction. They were all determined to take Xia Qingyuan down and kill her. In a moment, a vast battlefield quickly formed around Xia Qingyuan, and this battlefield was full of destructive storms. Above the sky, some divine swords penetrated heaven and earth, turning into a beam of infinite proportion, piercing the sky from top to bottom. The sound of destruction was heard without ceasing, and the cultivators from the heaven realm were directly penetrated by the swords and died instantly. These terrifying divine swords dominated the fate of all beings in this world, passing through many obstacles and aiming directly at Xia Qingyuan. At this time, a full moon appeared, and the moonlight sprinkled down on those divine swords. These divine swords seemed to be sealed in ice as their speed suddenly slowed down. But more than that, many cultivators above the firmament felt an extreme chill. It was the divine power of Yin that had frozen the world. Time and space seemed to stand still under the power of Yin, and those who did not comprehend this divine power were trapped in its power. Buzz! The divine arrows bloomed in the sky, piercing the void. Incomparably radiant divine flames bloomed above the void. The radiant arrows shot by Huang Zhouge directly pierced through many cultivators. It seemed as if they had combined the power of the solar and yin. Although this divine power was not the divine power of solar, it was not too far behind. In a brief instant, more than 1,000 cultivators fell from the void. It was a most horrific and petrifying sight. Bang! A terrifying divine power erupted as the cultivators from the human divine palace looked down at the area below. They saw a very beautiful woman who was the embodiment of feminine beauty. Like a goddess in the darkest night, the divine power of Yin bloomed from her. In an instant, she had frozen the space, forcing the space to come to a standstill. This was the goddess of Yue Divine Palace from the Shadow Realm, who had realized the divine power of Yin with the help of Yi Futian. She now unleashed the brilliance of the moon, which transformed into the power of Yin to assist the fight by freezing the space. Fierce battles broke out all around Xia Qingyuan as many top figures from the human divine palace had gone over there to attack. Even the army from the heavenly court had headed that way to render their support. For a time, people continued to perish in the area around Xia Qingyuan. Xia Qingyuan was in the middle of the battlefield, and many people were guarding her. Her most direct guardians were the army of the Lost Clan. They guarded the outer circle and did not allow any attackers to get close to her. However, when she saw that the people protecting her kept on dying without her even having a chance of saving them, Xia Qingyuan just felt a sense of sadness in her heart. She chose not to pursue the imperial realm because she wanted to save more people. But it did not go as she had imagined. Instead, it was because of her that more deaths had occurred. A look of sadness flashed across her eyes, and suddenly the polarities of life and death began revolving around her body, alternating with one another. An iciness now bloomed from her beautiful eyes as endless marks surged around her, all of which were the marks transformed by the power of life and death. As soon as she moved, Xia Qingyuan rushed out of the battlefield, no longer amid the crowd that was meant to protect her. She was also a top cultivator who had the opportunity to step onto the path of the great emperors. If not for this battle, she would have continued her pursuit of the imperial realm. Kill! When they saw Xia Qingyuan rush out on her own, many cultivators around came from all directions to encircle her. But they saw Xia Qingyuan merely cast a glance at the as countless lights of catastrophe seemed to erupt at the same time, turning into marks of death. Pa, pa, pa. Sounds of bloodshed were heard continuously. As soon as the marks of death hit their bodies, they would worm into the bodies, turning all traces of life into death in an instant. Death was all but inevitable, as it turned their bodies into pitch-black masses that fell from the sky. In a very brief moment, many cultivators fell from the sky as if the god of death had descended upon them. Those cultivators who were behind, fighting forward, had to stop involuntarily after witnessing the shocking sight in front of them. There was a deep fear in their eyes as they fixed their gazes on Xia Qingyuan. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. Previously, Xia Qingyuan was a savior, but now she had become a murderer with completely different prowess. But Xia Qingyuan did not care about the thoughts that ran through their little heads. Her body turned into a bolt of lightning as she smashed into the midst of the cultivators from the human realm. She was surrounded by endless lights of catastrophe, and those lights were like sword marks that carried a terrifying breath of death, which seemed to inflict immediate death as soon as they touched anyone. "Watch for those marks around her!" Someone in the human realm cautioned the others gravely. Xia Qingyuan's marks were the marks of the god of death. Anyone unlucky enough to be touched by them would be killed right away, as their life force was being swallowed up in an instant. As soon as they were buried by that will of death, they were already dead men. Those cultivators who had not comprehended divine powers had no way of stopping it. As soon as they were touched, they would die without a doubt. In the distance, Futian was calmly observing everything that happened on the battlefield. All the battles were imprinted in his mind, including the battle in which Xia Qingyuan was engaged. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. From that spatial passageway, the cultivators from the human realm poured into this world continuously and without ceasing. They were everywhere in the heavenly imperial city and carved a path all the way to the outside of the city. The cultivators from the human realm seemed to be deeply affected by the human ancestor. All of them displayed a strong murderous intent, wanting to destroy the heaven realm and unify the 9 states. "Why don't you go back to cultivate? I'll keep an eye over here." A soft and gentle voice spoke up next to Futian. It was Hua Jiu, who was standing next to him. "Very well." Futian nodded in agreement, and with a thought, an avatar suddenly appeared. His person left and departed to the small world. This avatar of his could spy on the outside world, and if anything happened, he would know right away. The war broke out and swept through the lands of the 7 realms. Countless cultivators were sucked into this significant battle involving the 7 realms, and no one could escape. The great army of the Devil World began to engage the great army of the Divine Prefecture in an all-out war. The Dark World and the empty Divine Realm armies were also involved in a full-scale war with the world of Buddhism. On the mainland of the Dark World, a barefoot monk was walking on the river Styx, walking forward, step by step. At the moment, this Dark World seemed relatively peaceful by comparison. On the contrary, the 7 realms were now transformed into hell. This monk's appearance was dignified and solemn, incomparably sacred. The light of Buddha lingered around his body. He walked along the river Styx and, moving forward steadily, came to an island. The island was tranquil, as if it was unaware of what was happening in the outside world. The monk stepped onto the island with bare feet. This was the island of light in the dark world. There was no strife and no hatred here. Yi Futian had come here once. The monk saw the Virgin, who resided on the island. She was teaching the children quietly, as always, as if the disputes on the outside world had nothing to do with her. The children were a little curious when they saw a strange monk here and could not help but look at the monk. The monk smiled at them and watched the woman quietly. "What business does the master have here?" the woman finally asked the monk, unable to hold back any longer. "You should know me." The monk saluted, his hands clasped together. "Surely the master jests. We have never met before. How could I know you?" The woman responded calmly. "Amitabha." The monk put his hands together and said to the woman, "You desired a pure land with absolute light, but where there are people, it is doomed to rife with disputes. Even Buddhist holy lands cannot be spared, so how can there be such a thing as an absolute pure land?" "This here is the pure land," said the woman. "No need to deceive yourself," said the monk as he waved his hands. Suddenly imageries appeared upon the lake. These imageries were of wars on the lands of the 7 realms. There was destruction everywhere, countless people perishing. "Destruction will only bring darkness, not light," the monk continued. "Is the current situation really the result that you wanted? Master has mistaken me for someone else." There was a sign of disturbance in the woman's eyes when she saw those images. "I can see your fate," the monk said suddenly. The woman was stunned by his claim. Then she looked at the monk curiously. "Tell me." "Death is salvation," the monk replied. "Salvation?" The woman looked at the monk and continued, "I don't need salvation. The master best go elsewhere." "Amitabha." The monk folded his hands together and said to the woman, "Even as the master of darkness, there is still light in your heart. There is no absolute darkness nor absolute light in this world. No matter the destructions or how it is reborn, the world is still the same, and only the law can change the world, not destruction and death." The woman's eyes sharpened as she stared at the monk and said, "Can Omniscient really see the future?" At this moment, her temperament suddenly became majestic. It contained an incomparably mighty solemnity. The monk in front of her was none other than the Buddha of Destiny. "The great paths are connected, and there is not much difference as they exist in the world," said the Buddha of Destiny. "If you want to find the person who led you into darkness, the answer lies in the human realm." In the dark world was a passageway that connected to the human realm. The human realm was known as the most perfect realm after the collapse of the heavenly path. Under the governance of the human ancestor, the human realm had been peaceful and stable, and its cultivators likewise were strong in strength. But now, cultivators from the human realm had flooded into the heaven realm and launched a war of invasion. At this time, in a city in the human realm, a beautiful woman appeared. This woman was dressed in white and looked pristine from head to toe. It was the woman from the dark world. The words of the Buddha of Destiny had touched upon the answer she had always wanted to know. Therefore, she came to the human realm. As soon as her thoughts moved, countless imageries from the city below came rushing into her mind. The human realm instigated the invasion of the heaven realm and ignited the fire of war in the heaven realm. However, this city inside the human realm was peaceful and quiet, forming a stark contrast with the chaos outside. Inside a particular clan, a few people were talking. A young woman asked, "Master, how is the war outside progressing? Have we taken the heaven realm and the divine prefecture?" The human ancestor led the powers of the entire human realm to launch the battle of the 7 realms. How could he fail? "Victory is the only outcome for this war," her master responded with strong conviction in his voice. It sounded like whatever the human ancestor intended to do would indeed become a reality. The young woman nodded slightly, but then she seemed to have remembered something as she continued. It's just that in this unprecedented warfare, which the human realm started, won't there be a lot of cultivators who perish because of it? And will there be a lot of innocent lives lost in the heaven realm and the divine prefecture because of it? Silly girl, her master laughed in a low voice. The human ancestor fought for the justice of the world, and naturally there will be collateral damage. As long as the heaven realm and the divine prefecture are taken, the 7 realms will be united, and the world will thrive under the established order by the human ancestor. Then they will all thank the human ancestor, who will lead the world to the glory of your. This is the great path. / Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. The woman nodded lightly as if she was suddenly enlightened. She said with a smile, the human ancestor fought to save all living beings in the 7 realms. When the 7 realms are unified, everyone in the world will believe in the human ancestor. Unfortunately, my cultivation is still not advanced enough, or else I will also join the battle and go to the heaven realm to fight. Just as they were talking amongst themselves, suddenly another person appeared next to them. The 2 of them were startled as they fixed their attention on the woman who appeared out of nowhere. They saw the woman frown slightly, a puzzled look on her face as she focused her attention on this teacher and student duo who were talking to each other. Heaven and the divine prefecture each have its own established order already, especially the divine prefecture. Under the governance of Dong Huang the Great, the divine prefecture is peaceful and prosperous, a place where many in the world had gone to seek the way and cultivate. Why do they need to be saved? The woman from the light path looked at the 2. She continued, they already have their own orders. The invasion of the human realm has devastated the lives of many. How can this constitute justice? Who are you? The elder did not answer her question right away, but stared at the woman with heightened alert as he posed the question. Answer my question, the woman said coldly as invisible coercion enveloped the other 2, making them both feel a suffocating feeling. The young woman responded, Yi Futian of the heaven realm and Dong Huang the Great of the divine prefecture were weaving a conspiracy, and it will probably put the world in jeopardy. The human ancestor took charge to deal out justice and restore the order of the world. Naturally, this is the justice of the world. When she heard this answer, the woman in white felt a little bewildered. The other was not at a tender age of ignorance, and she was no beginner in cultivation. Yet, how could she say such unreasonable things? So the human ancestor must be in the right? She asked. The human ancestor is in the right, the woman responded. Are you disrespecting the human ancestor? The old man's eyes sharpened. Seeing the reaction of these 2, the woman disappeared immediately and left as if she knew that it was useless to talk any more with them. They were deeply entrenched in their belief, and it was impossible to persuade them otherwise. Somewhere else, in a major clan in the city, many cultivators were participating in a ritual. Their clan leader had died in the battle of the heaven realm. The whole clan was grieving. Our clan leader answered the call of the human ancestor to fight for the order of the world, the unification of the 7 realms, and for justice. Although he is no more, his spirit will live on forever. This solemn pronouncement resounded throughout the crowd. Everyone looked on gravely and knelt to pay their final respect to the dead. They were the descendants of the ones who died in battle, but they felt honored. It was as if they were proud of those who died fighting for such causes. I want to go to the heaven realm to fight in the war as well, someone said, and everyone else looked at the speaker. A man asked, Your cultivation is not yet up to par. Don't you want to cultivate for a while longer before you go? I don't want to miss it, and I'm afraid such an opportunity will not be there in the future, the man replied, with a slight fanaticism in his voice. All these imageries were deeply imprinted in the woman's mind. Her divine consciousness covered the entire city, and she found that similar sights were happening everywhere. Some were even more outlandish than this. Cultivators of the human realm had this deep-rooted belief that this was a fight for the justice of the world and to restore the order of the world. The human ancestor was their absolute belief, which could not be shaken. Even if their loved ones died in the battle, their hatred was targeted squarely at the heaven realm, and they did not feel much sadness. The woman's face changed, and the calmness and tranquility she had moments ago were gone. At this moment, countless images appeared in her mind, and the past came alive vividly before her eyes. She remembered that in her cultivation journey, she, too, had gone astray and sunken into darkness when she was young. She had forsaken everything and was trapped in demonic barriers. In the name of cultivation, she lost her humanity. She would never forget the expressions on the faces of her parents when they perished at her hands. However, she seemed to be possessed at that time, continuing her walk deeper on the road of darkness and turning into the devil herself. She had seen all the darkness in the world and experienced hell on earth, until one day she became the master of darkness. All those things in the human realm now had a familiar feel, but even she knew that these cultivators were not under direct control. She disappeared, and she embarked to other places in the human realm. She found that it was the same everywhere. She had even seen something more exaggerated, like those cultivators from the human realm who believed in justice. They regarded invasion and killing as the right thing to do and as their life's mission. Human ancestor. At this time, the woman stood in the void, and she could only feel a biting iciness all over her body. In those quiet eyes, there was only darkness at this moment and an extremely palpable murderous intent. She had never liked the human ancestor. She thought that the human ancestor was hypocritical and pretended to be virtuous. From the human ancestor, she could see the shadow of her own master. At this moment, she had a feeling that she might be right and that it was not the shadow of her master. It was possible that human ancestor could be her master. The cultivator who brought him into the darkness was very likely the incarnation of the human ancestor, and only the human ancestor had such abilities. Crack! With her fists clenched, a frantic will of destruction was about to burst from her, but it was suppressed by her. It was an unforgettable hatred that she was feeling right now. The human ancestor was able to influence the thoughts and emotions of all the cultivators in the entire human realm. He had already advanced to such a terrifying place that the entire human realm completely belonged to him. Inside the human divine palace, there was peace at the moment. There were no conflicts or disputes. Everything appeared like a place out of this world that was exceptionally tranquility. In front of a palace, the human ancestor was chatting with a child. The scene was peaceful, in stark contrast to the war currently taking place in the Seven Realms. At this time, a strong fluctuation came from the sky. The human ancestor raised his head to look up before seeing a divine light descended upon the human divine palace, and someone landed directly in front of him. Immediately, the human ancestor stepped aside and bowed in reverence. A handsome and extraordinary young man appeared where the divine light fell. His body gradually solidified, and he emerged from that elusive shadow. It seemed as if he was not made of flesh and blood at all. The child looked at the young man curiously and seemed a little puzzled by him. He looked at the human ancestor and wondered why he was so respectful to this young man. Wasn't the human ancestor the master of the human realm? Master! The human ancestor bowed and called out, behaving extremely respectfully. It appeared as if the young man was the true master behind the scenes in the human realm. "Sir, who are you?" The child looked at the young man and asked. The young man's body gradually materialized, and he looked at the child with a gentle smile. He said, "I am the human ancestor." Human ancestor. The child looked at him, then at the other human ancestor next to him, asking doubtfully, "Then who is he?" Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. He is also the human ancestor. The young man responded. The human ancestor is not just one person. There are many human ancestors. It is because of this that we are considered the ancestors of mankind. The child scratched his head, still puzzled. He had no idea what the young man was talking about. The young man walked up to the child and rubbed his head. He stooped down and said with a smile, "When I was younger, I was just like you, an ordinary person who suffered my share of bullying. That was the era when divine power ruled, when the gods controlled the order of the world. Mortals were like insects, and they could only look up to the gods. In the age of the gods held supreme power. When the gods fought, even the heavens were shattered and many died. My parents, wife, and children were among the unfortunate who died. But even as they died, they did not get so much as a look of sympathy because the gods cared not for the deaths of mortals. In front of the gods, mortals are nothing but ants on the ground. No one would apologize to ants, nor would they have to pay for what they did to the ants. But fortunately, the gods died when the apocalyptic catastrophe destroyed all the gods. It was possible even for the gods who were high above to die. It was an era full of fear and hatred. It was the worst of eras, but it was also the best. When all the gods fell, everything in the world would be remade. Without the gods, mortals become the focus of the world." The young man spoke calmly as if he was telling a story from the ancient past. Gods are nothing. They are just mortals who control powerful forces. They can die and they have emotions just like everyone else. They think like mortals, so mortals are gods and everyone can become a god. "Will I be able to do that too?" the child asked innocently, looking at the young man with some longing in his eyes. "Of course," the young man nodded. "God and man, the divine and the mortals are one and the same." Having said that, he stretched out his hand with a drop of water in his palm and asked, "What is this?" "A drop of water," the child replied. The water droplet floated into the air, and in that tiny water droplet, a terrifying force was being born, and the water droplet began to spin. It then flew through the air, and a building in the distance instantly collapsed and shattered, turning into a pile of dust. Behold! Even a drop of water can have incredible power, but its essence is still of water. The young man looked at the child and continued, "It's the same with people. There is no essential difference between mortals and gods, as they are the same. Do you understand?" The child shook his head. The young man smiled as he rubbed the child's head again. He stood up and continued, "It's all right if you don't understand. Everyone in the world is stupid and ignorant because they are controlled by their emotions and desires and can never escape from their grip. This is the reason why this world needs to be remade." "But how?" the child asked curiously, while his eyes were still fastened on the young man. His eyes were innocent. The young man looked down at him with a smile. "Create a world of the gods." "The world of the gods," the child murmured. "What kind of a world is the world of the gods?" But in the next moment he stopped thinking. The young man's body turned into an intense light and shot directly into his body. The child's eyes revealed a pained look, and his face twisted. He looked at the elusive figure in front of him and opened his mouth as if shouting something out. There was despair and fear in his eyes as tears flooded out from them. He reached out his trembling hands, trying to grab something, but ultimately he was unable to. Soon, the divine light submerged his body, and the look in the child's eyes changed. It was freezing, with a sense of contempt that disregarded everything as if there was no emotion. Afterward, he flexed his arm a bit, looked at it, and appeared satisfied. "It's all right," he said in a low voice. "Congratulations, master," said the human ancestor next to him. "I'm the same as you," said the child. Immediately the human ancestor understood what he meant and nodded. The human divine palace was peaceful and harmonious at the moment, but the war that raged in the 7 realms was becoming more fierce. This war had swept through the 7 realms at an incredible speed. At this time, there was still a steady stream of cultivators who traveled across domains to participate in the war. In the Western world of Buddhism, the battles were incredibly fierce. The combined forces of the dark world and the empty divine realm swept through the Buddhist world. These battles were extremely costly and stained the Buddhist Pure Land with blood. The sound of chanting Buddhist scriptures could be heard everywhere on the land, as if they were trying to redeem the dead. However, just when the war had reached a crescendo, a shocking turn of events occurred. The army of the Dark World that invaded the Buddhist world suddenly stopped fighting against Buddhist cultivators. They now turned their attention to the cultivators of the empty divine realm, and the sudden slaughter caught these cultivators off guard. They had no chance to react to what was happening to them. Even the cultivators from the Buddhist world were completely stunned and did not understand what was happening. Why would the dark world and the empty divine realm suddenly turn on one another and start infighting? The Buddhist cultivators couldn't react for a while. They were content to stand on the sidelines, letting the others fight amongst themselves. It didn't take long for the battlefield in the Western world of Buddhism to undergo earth-shattering changes. Due to the internal war between the dark world and the empty divine realm, Buddhist cultivators began the sweep to cut down the power of these two worlds, so the war now turned into a chaotic, three-way battle. However, in the main battlefield of Buddhism, the Western world of Buddhism still held the absolute advantage, causing the cultivators of the other two worlds to suffer steady defeats and be forced into retreat. There was no doubt that if things continued this way, the dark world and the empty divine realm would eventually be beaten off of the battlefield entirely. Because of this, the evil emperor himself went to the dark divine mountain. The evil emperor came to the dark court to see the dark sovereign. "Why betray me?" the evil emperor asked the dark sovereign unceremoniously. "Evil emperor, do you know the truth about the human ancestor?" asked the dark sovereign. "That's not important." The evil emperor brushed the question aside nonchalantly. "No, it is essential." The dark sovereign looked at the evil emperor as she took off her mask, revealing an indifferent face. The evil emperor did not seem surprised, as his expression remained as it was before. "Do you know how I became the Lord of Darkness?" The dark sovereign looked at the evil emperor and continued, "Once I was just like so many others, simple-minded and ordinary, until one person appeared and everything changed. He taught me cultivation and led me on the path of darkness. He let me experience the cruelest and darkest side of this world. So step by step, I came to be the master of the dark world today. Because of this, you think the whole world is dark and you wanted nothing but destruction," said the evil emperor. "Yes," the dark sovereign nodded. "In this turbid dark world, the dawn will only appear after destruction." "Understandable," the evil emperor nodded. "The dragon slayer will eventually become the evil dragon. Perhaps the teacher who taught you is the same. He has also experienced darkness, tried to change the world, and led you to darkness. Very possibly he is the human ancestor," the dark sovereign said to the evil emperor. The evil emperor was silent for a moment when he heard those words, but then said, "Everything in the world will eventually settle and cannot be changed. Now he also seems to have realized your wish, which is to bring darkness to the world. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. No, that is not what I want." "What is it that you want, then?" the evil emperor asked her. The dark sovereign was stunned by this question. What was it that she wanted? Before, her goal was always clear and firm: shroud the earth with darkness. But now, why was she unsure? "You want revenge," the evil emperor looked at her, "because you discovered the truth. The belief that you held for so long began to wobble. At this time, even you have no idea what you want to do. If you continue with your previous goal, then, in a way, you have complied with the wishes of your enemy, so you are uncertain now. You are struggling inside." The dark sovereign looked at the evil emperor in the eyes, and those evil eyes seemed to see through the truth. She nodded and said yes. Indeed, she was struggling. Too late. The evil emperor looked at the dark sovereign and said, "Everything has settled, and everything in the world has been predetermined. Since it can't be changed, why not go along with it? Is this still the evil lord of the empty divine realm? The dark sovereign looked at the evil emperor and asked, "And you? Are you still the lord of darkness who wants to destroy the world?" The evil emperor responded. The two stared at each other as invisible coercion enveloped the world. All the cultivators of the entire dark court could feel that suffocating pressure. In the era when the heavenly path collapsed, the gods fell, as well as so many people in the world. Now, the era seems to be repeating itself, and no one can predict what will happen in the future. However, whether it is the cultivator of the dark world or the empty divine realm, whether it is you or me, we all have the right to live, the evil emperor continued while fixing his attention on the dark sovereign. His idea was simple enough. He wanted to live and continue to carry on in this dangerous era. He also hoped to see more of empty divine realms cultivators survive. The balance had been broken, and war was unavoidable, so he must follow the trend of things as they were. Only by surviving could he have the chance to get to a higher level until he was strong enough to pose a threat to the human ancestor. But for now, he had no way of fighting back. As one of the 6 emperors in the world, he was a cultivator standing at the top, but even he had to face reality. When the gods returned and descended, he knew that the era of the 6 emperors was history. "So," the dark sovereign asked as she looked at the evil emperor, "your order caused the empty divine realm to lose more cultivators, and I won't risk anyone else in today's battle," the evil emperor said. He disappeared from where he was. The dark sovereign glanced upward, then stepped out and headed towards the void. After a while, heaven and earth roared in the sky above the dark court, and the void seemed to be broken. A terrifying divine power made the hell in the dark world tremble and the sea of the underworld scream. In the human realm, on all the continents, countless cultivators raised their heads. Above the firmament, they saw a gigantic face, and it was the face of the human ancestor. "Your Majesty, the human ancestor." Countless cultivators bowed and saluted him, displaying a fervent fanaticism. The face of the human ancestor looked at the people of the world and said, "I've been waiting for this day for a very long time, but others stopped me. Now I'm finally back." Before this, the people of the human realm have already gone to the 7 realms, leading the fight for justice, fighting for the unification of the 7 realms. Now it is your turn. When his words fell, divine light descended from the firmament, and countless divine lights fell on the people. At this moment, all the cultivators in the human realm were bathed in that divine light, and their eyes became even more frenzied, with an indescribable and utmost reverence. More importantly, they also felt the power which seemed to augment the capabilities they had already possessed. The divine light that descended strengthened them. This will be a new era, the era of the gods. After the unification of the 7 realms, I will bless the world and let my people have the opportunity to become gods. At this moment, even as mortals, you shall stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods, the human ancestor continued. No one doubted his words at this moment, as they had a deep conviction of their belief. All of them were shouting and cheering. Boom, boom, boom. Heaven and earth trembled, and an even more terrifying divine power descended and fell on the people. Suddenly, they felt that they were the incarnation of gods. Just as the human ancestor told them, as mortals, they were standing shoulder to shoulder with the gods. Many spatial passageways appeared, leading to different places. "Go forth. The 7 realms and the original realm will be ours. This is the best of times." The human ancestor's voice resounded throughout the world, full of fervent fanaticism. Countless cultivators in the human realm set off on their missions, traveling through the spatial passageways and embarked to other worlds. In the devil world, the devil emperor stood on the top of the devil imperial palace, and his eyes seemed to have penetrated the void, seeing everything that was happening in the human realm. What he saw was so powerful and shocking that even the heart of the devil emperor trembled. "This is madness," the devil emperor spat. The human ancestor had gained direct control of the people in the world. He was using these people to reshape the world order, let them rule the world so that the whole world would operate only by his will. In the land of the divine prefecture, in Donghuang Imperial Palace, Donghuang the Great also saw what was happening in the human realm, and he was equally shocked. He, too, exclaimed, "The human ancestor has gone mad." In the world of Buddhism, in the endless nothingness, a sound of Buddha was heard. It was the voice of the Buddha. The human ancestor was no longer just trying to replace the heavenly path. Yi Futian hovered in the void of the heavenly realm while watching the projections of the live happenings from all realms that appeared around him. The cultivators of the human realm unleashed their worldwide conquest and began to slaughter the people from other realms indiscriminately. Mountains of corpses could be seen everywhere. It was a living hell. The scariest part of it all would be the cultivators of the human realm who looked like they were possessed. None of them were in their right minds. It was as if they were born to kill. Moreover, their strength was greatly enhanced, making them an unstoppable bunch of mindless killing machines. Amitabha, the Buddha of Destiny who stood beside Yi Futian, started reciting Buddhist sutra. He put his hands together after witnessing the violent and gory scenes. "Are you able to peer into the fate of our future?" Yi Futian asked the Buddha of Destiny. "Even I could not peep into your future destiny, Your Highness. There is no way to prevent this predestined fate from taking place. Furthermore, the elite cultivators in this world will have to go through great tribulation. Unfortunately, I cannot perceive what fate has in store for us beyond this point due to the limitation of my cultivation." The Buddha of Destiny put his palms together and answered. Although he could not look into Yi Futian's destiny, he could tell that the latter would have to face an arduous ordeal. "Is there no one that can stop the human ancestor?" Yi Futian murmured. The human ancestor had been controlling the cultivators of the human realm to conquer the whole world. But the former still could not figure out what was the ultimate goal of the latter. The Buddha of Destiny remained taciturn. The human ancestor was the most mysterious and powerful existence since the ancient days. Even though they could alter the flow of time, they still could not catch up to the tier of his cultivation and make up for the difference between their cultivation duration. Yi Futian enveloped the entire domain of the heavenly realm with his divine consciousness. Following that, he noticed many combatants in danger, and the 2 legions he had personally trained had lost many of their forces. Even Xia Qingyuan, Dou Zhao, and the rest were in dire situations. Although they were powerful cultivators, they began to show signs of fatigue after continuously fighting for days. There were constant reinforcements from the human realm, and none of them acted like themselves. This was never a fair battle from the start. The human ancestor had manipulated the war by controlling the minds of the cultivators of the human realm. Please keep reading on Wuxia World. EU. After watching the devastative scenes from the projections, Yi Futian knew that he could not allow things to go on like this. If he were to be led by the human ancestor's pace, it would spell doom for the living beings in the world. It was something that they could never afford to see. Bang! Yi Futian manifested a terrifying god's might that covered the entire atmosphere of the heavenly realm with a thought. At once, everyone lifted their heads to look at the sky. The cultivators of the human realm furrowed their brows, while the combatants of the heavenly realm, who looked exhausted and demoralized, felt a huge relief because their ruler, the heavenly emperor, began to interfere with the war. If the war continued any longer, all of them would be annihilated. Attention, you who have invaded the heaven realm. The human ancestor refined the human realm and controlled you to occupy the heavenly realm and massacre its people. But I hereby announce that there shall be no killing and battling in the heavenly realm from this moment onward. Everyone must obey the order for a ceasefire. Offenders will be subject to immediate execution. Yi Futian's voice resounded through the whole heavenly realm. Naturally, the cultivators of the human realm would never listen to his words, as they would only obey the will of the human ancestor to fight for the cause of their justice and unite the 7 realms. From their point of view, Futian had said that because he was afraid of losing. Now that he was on the losing end of the battle, the only way to turn the tide would be his intervention. Kill them. Some cultivators of the human realm in the heavenly imperial city paid no heed to Futian's warning and continued their killing spree. They could not think straight since they were controlled by their emotions. They were trapped in their obstinacy, while some even lost themselves to the human ancestors' mind control. Boom! A tribulation of destruction rained from the sky, while an overpowering god's might permeated the air. All those who came into contact with it were completely erased. In that instant, countless lights of catastrophe shot down from the sky and killed numerous cultivators of the human realm. Everyone, retreat from the battlefield at once. Futian ordered. He was afraid that the cultivators of the human realm might take revenge on him, since he had broken the unspoken rule of the cultivation world. Hence, he commanded the combatants of the heavenly realm to pull back. Rumble. An ominous sound could be heard reverberating in the air. The space passage that connected from the human realm enlarged even more. The border between the 2 realms seemed to have vanished. There would no longer be a distinction between the heaven realm and the human realm. A destructive divine thunder, also called the Chaos True Thunder, was fired from the human realm to the heavenly realm at a scale that could exterminate every cultivator in that realm. At the same time, multiple silhouettes of the gods showed up at the connecting point between the 2 realms, exuding a spine-chilling aura. Nevertheless, many figures of the great emperors appeared beside Futian. It was the rivalry between the newly emerged great emperors of the heavenly realm and the old gods from ancient times. Charge! The people of the human realm gasped in astonishment. Instantaneously, the silhouettes of the gods vanished from sight when they crossed over the heaven realm, appearing again at different locations in the next instant. Since Futian had broken the unspoken rules, there would be no law and restriction anymore. What happened next would be a genocide. Figures of ancient gods headed toward multiple points at high speed, turning into flashes of lightning as they moved. The group of the great emperors beside Futian made a move the moment the bodies of the ancient gods glowed up. Aiming at their targets, the former disappeared into thin air right after they accelerated at the same speed. The ancient god of wind had the fastest speed among all. A storm would be stirred up whenever he moved, destroying everything in his path. As a result, every building that he passed by was utterly demolished, killing all the cultivators who were taking shelter inside in the process. After accelerating his speed to the limits, he traversed the city in a flash, forming a crevasse in the middle of it. Following that, a bolt of lightning was closing in on him from behind at a breakneck speed. It looked like a beam of light that traveled across the space and aimed directly at him. The god of wind knitted his brows together when he noticed someone was hot on his heels. With a thought, he created devastating wind blades with his divine power and turned them into a tornado that tore open the void. Immediately, the calamitous cyclone rushed toward that light, turning everything in its path into clouds of dust. That light figure headed into the twister, since they could not evade it while moving at such speed. Everything happened within a short moment that was faster than the speed of lightning. Whiz! That light figure passed through the cyclone and came out from the other side, flying toward the god of wind. At the sight of it, the expression of the latter turned glum and transformed himself into an intangible wind current, further increasing his moving speed. Just then, a glaring light that covered a large extent of the boundless space radiated the atmosphere before it. The light pierced through everything it touched. A groan could be heard after a while, and the light immediately launched itself in the direction of the sound. In the direction where the divine light beamed, someone let out a shriek of agony. Immediately after, the god of wind showed himself. However, the silhouette of his gallant form was pierced through by countless rays of light, filling his body with innumerable holes of light. The glaring light gleamed across a vast distance, brimming the void with its brightness. Next, his body was crumbled into uncountable pieces and gradually receded from view. While a disembodied phantom attempted to flee from the scene, the light figure shot a light beam at the former to finish it off, giving no chance to any of its remnants to survive. After a while, the silhouette of Chun-Yi appeared in that place. Turning his eyes in another direction, he dashed forward to another destination. Long ago he had received the inheritance of the Bright Temple, and his perseverance in cultivation finally made him a genuine god of light. While Chun-Yi was going around exterminating the enemies, the great emperors beside Yi Futian sealed up the heavenly imperial city. Standing in different locations, they unleashed the divine domain of the Great Path to prevent the gods of the human realm from killing indiscriminately. In another place, Yi Wuqin, Yaya, and Sword Master of Li Hin moved together in a group to set up a sword matrix. At that time, one of the gods entered the sword matrix and threw a domineering punch that broke the void, smashing the sword will into pieces. Fang Siyuan held a golden divine spear in his hand in another scene. It was emanating an overwhelming divine power of the source of the Great Path. The divine artifact held in the hands of the core members of the great emperors were treasures born in the heavenly path world of Yi Futian. In the opposite direction, a god with a burly figure walked toward them with a black overlord spear that was brimming with divine power in his hand. The void would tremble with every step he took. Bang! After he launched an attack, the overlord spear tore the fabric of space-time and pierced through the atmosphere, firing at Fang Siyuan. In response, the latter intensified his intent of battle and poured his divine power into the golden divine spear. Thrusting his weapon forward, it turned into a bolt of magnificent golden lightning that cracked the air in the atmosphere, aiming at the opponent. At the collision of the two spears, the entire scenery turned into what seemed like an apocalypse, destroying everything in the atmosphere nearby. Fang Siyuan was sent flying backward by the impact. Right then, he turned around and headed into the sky, getting further away from the battlefield. After all, this place could not handle having so many great emperors clashing with each other at the same time. Wasting no time, his opponent tailed him and headed to the sky. The father and son duo, Blind Tai and Tai Tu, stood together in another location. They both unleashed their intimidating divine powers, while holding hammers of Tianshan that were packed with frightening energies in their hands to watch over that place. After noticing an approaching god, they swung their divine hammers and battled their enemy. A war between the gods broke out in different locations simultaneously. The size of their war zone was extremely vast. In the blink of an eye, they expanded it from the scale of the heavenly imperial city to the entire continent. Even though it was impossible for the great emperors of the heavenly realm to lock their enemies within a small space, stalling or luring the latter from the battlefield so that their fights would not affect the common people was manageable. Fortunately, their opponents did not deliberately attack the weaker cultivators. Please keep reading 0 and MYB0XN0VL. C0M. After all, most of them were ancient Tianshan, so they were somewhat reluctant to do so. The war of the gods erupted in multiple locations at the same time. Rumble, a violent resonant sound, caught the attention of many cultivators. After lowering their heads, they noticed that the heavenly imperial city was moving. They were taken aback by the sight of it. No, it's not just the heavenly imperial city, but the whole continent. A person was stunned after realizing the fact. Those who witnessed the bizarre sighting remained in the same spot as they watched the heavenly imperial city getting further away from them. The cultivators who remained in the city didn't dare to fly, so they just let themselves be dragged away alongside the entire city. Shortly after, they noticed that the war zone was gradually moving further from them. It looked like someone was pulling the whole continent. Eventually, the heavenly imperial city became small in the eyes of the other cultivators. the whole continent was moved away to a far-off distance from the battlefield. Soon after, they caught sight of a massive phantasm of a divine dragon that occupied a huge part of the sky, pulling the entire continent away until it became minuscule. After that, the silhouette of the divine dragon moved toward the war zone in the sky steadily. A while later, they spotted a stunning woman at the scene, and she was none other than Dong Huang Diyuan. She was the one who summoned the ancestral dragon to pull the continent away from the war zone. With that, there were only the gods left on the battleground. In short, it had become the battlefield of the gods. Whoosh! A silhouette took a step forward and turned into a flash of lightning while staring down at Dong Huang Diyuan with a sharp look. After waving his hand, a sky river of swords manifested in the firmament and split open the atmosphere, slashing at Dong Huang Diyuan at lightning speed. If this slash were to hit Dong Huang Diyuan, she might not get away unscathed, although she had reached the great emperor plan for years already. After all, the one who launched the attack was Eternal Sword Lord, a great emperor from ancient times. Right before the slashes of the swords were about to reach Dong Huang Diyuan, a figure suddenly showed up in front of her and stretched his hand to touch the eternal swords with his finger. Immediately, the entire swords were shattered. It slowly dissipated and reduced to nothingness. "Father," Dong Huang Diyuan murmured. The person who appeared before her in the nick of time was Dong Huang the Great. Turning to look at the Eternal Sword Lord, he criticized, "You were one of those who had stood at the pinnacle of cultivation since ancient times. I couldn't believe someone of your status would do something as disgraceful as trying to kill a junior. Everyone starts their cultivation journey at different timing. There's no such thing as seniority on the battlefield." After the Eternal Sword Lord finished speaking, the whole atmosphere turned into the Eternal Sword Domain, where countless swords were fired at Dong Huang the Great. "Get out of here, first," Dong Huang the Great whispered to Dong Huang Di. Wasting no time, she fled from the battleground with the divine power of revelation, shielding her so that the sword domain could not harm her. At that time, Dong Huang the Great's divine power of revelation had grown even more powerful. Within the revelation divine domain, it would not allow any other divine powers to exist. Hence, most of the swords were utterly disintegrated. After the revelation would be the void. Needless to say, Dong Huang the Great had once again improved his cultivation to the next level. Clang! Numerous swords hovered around the atmosphere with the control of Dong Huang the Great's thought. The moment the heaven-punishing sword will surged its energy, all of the swords were launched at the Eternal Sword Lord, shattering everything in their paths and pulverizing all things to nothingness. It was as if no other power could stand against his heaven-punishing sword. "You've improved a lot," the Eternal Sword Lord commented after sensing the sword will. Compared to the last time they had clashed with each other, Dong Huang the Great's divine power had enhanced even further. That was indeed a phenomenal speed of improvement. "I respect you as one of the great emperors whose name was known by many during ancient times. If you were to leave this battlefield at once, I would not lay a hand on you," Dong Huang the Great notified with a tone brimming with absolute confidence, even though he was talking to an ancient super-great emperor. It was only natural since he was one of the strongest beings in the world at that time. Although the future generations might never know the golden age of the ancient emperors, I can finally see it again today. The Eternal Sword Lord remarked solemnly as a sword will gradually intensify. "Quit presuming on your seniority," Dong Huang the Great rebuked savagely. This was a fight between the super-great emperor of ancient times and the apex great emperor of the current age. Rumble! A divine power of destruction rained down from the sky, causing many to raise their heads and check out the situation above them, only to find an older man hovering there. That man was exploding a powerful aura as if he was a god who had existed since ancient times, the primogenitor of all sentient beings whose very presence would cause everyone to kneel and worship him. This aged man was also a super-great emperor who was world-renowned during ancient times. He was named as one of the progenitors of the great emperors, since he had been cultivating for ages. When his name had already been uttered by everyone, the human ancestor might not even exist yet. He was the primary emperor who had fought countless conquests in his life. The man hardly ever lost during the Age of the Gods and even the Battle of the Gods. Unfortunately, a legend like him had lost his life during the collapse of the Great Path. Now that he had been resurrected in this era, he had to face a whole bunch of opponents who were the junior gods. These people were the great emperors of the younger generation, challenging the deific prerogative of the ancient ones.